about IRT. The reason we're going to talk about IRT reconciliation is because sites are enrolling again. Sites are using the IRT again to recruit patients. And the reconciliation of this data remains a significant data cleaning issue. We burn a lot of hours trying to get this data clean. And it's rare that we can get it done with just
there we go. All right, everybody, welcome. This is Fighting the World with Wistric and Bruce. That would be me, Wistric.
And me, Bruce.
There you go. Tonight, we're going to talk about scenarios. In general, what is there, why is there, and how can it be better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bruce, go ahead, do the intros. We didn't plan this one out as thoroughly as we did last time.
So we have 4 panelists with us tonight, and they were picked from a variety of kingdoms to kind of show a little bit more of a spread about ranging from small events, smaller melee events, to larger melee events like Gulf Wars and Pennsic. I'm going to let them introduce themselves first, but in order across the top here. Just to make sure that everyone gets their fair shake at an introduction. So I'm going to let them take it away, and please don't make your boasts more than like 5 minutes. Let's start with Peter Grau from the Mid-Realm.
Hello, Peter Grau from Bremen. I was Mid-Realm General for Rapier for Appendix 43 and 44. I was Lieutenant General for Rapier under Adam Mackay for the 2 Appendix before that, and started out in unit command, worked up through regional, and then into kingdom level. Yeah, been doing this for, what, 12 years now?
Give or take. All right, next we're gonna go over to Oliver Dogberry from Caid.
Hello, I'm Oliver Dogberry. I love melee. It's one of the things I really enjoy about this sport that we do. I've been fencing since 2004. I've been designing scenarios about 2007, 2006. Out here on the West Coast, we have a baronial war called Betrayal in May that is about 2,200 people, 2,400 people down here who also attend Australia and Great Western War. And I enjoy breaking down the scenarios into their little pieces. I have a scenario 101 class that I teach where I literally just break everything down and give all the different things that you can do to build scenarios back up from that.
Excellent. All right, next up we have Warwick from An Tir.
Hi, thanks for having me. I've been playing for over 2 decades. I used to be a fringe player, and in those 2 decades, I'm also a game designer, a professional game designer. It's what I do for a living. I've shipped like 50 million units or something. So I've been doing it for a long, long time, and I bring that to designing scenarios, and I bring that to deconstructing scenarios when I'm in them. And I guess my lineage can't match these Pennsic generals at all. But as a fringe fighter, one year we put together all the mercenaries at one of our largest events, which was about 60, and took on the royalists and royally whooped them.
That sounds like a lot of fun. All right, and then last but not least, Hawke, who will hit me if I use her full name, from Trimaris.
Hi, I'm Hawke. I have a full name, Miriam de Hawke of Trimaris. Nobody calls me that. Everyone just calls me Hawke. Much easier. Oh God, lineage. I've served as general for Trimaris, both at Gulf Wars and Pennsic, as well as other random little events. My household, the Wandering Turnip Farmers, if you've ever seen us, we show up at a couple of Atlantean events, and somehow they put me in charge because they're crazy people, and I talk a lot. I'm currently co-RMicking with Wistric Gulf Wars. I've been doing that for 2 years. Year and a half or 2 years, depending how we want to count it, since this year was canceled. And deputy before that. And just stepped down as Kingdom Rapier Marshal for the Kingdom of Trimaris as well. I think that's everything I've done. And I stab people sometimes. So I get to be very involved in the Gulf Wars, setting up of melees and all the background of that. So that's kind of my expertise side of that.
She also has a penchant for name tags, so be careful.
This
This
is
is round up at one of her wars. Just a note for anyone who has their video on or their mic unmuted, we are recording. We currently have been asked by the Society social media officer whether or not they can share this. So if you have any issues with that, please turn off your camera. All right. Wistric, anything else to add before we get going?
No, just as we do get into this, shall we jump to the first question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so the first thing we really want to pick apart between Caid, Trimaris, An Tir, and Mid-Realm is what does a standard melee scenario look like in your kingdom? The most either run-of-the-mill or the most run thing that you do at your big melee events. And we kind of want to delve into the why it looks that way. Why is that good for your region? But first, let's go with a quick description of what a standard melee event or melee scenario would look like, whether it's for the Mid-Realm, our war camps, or for like Trimaris, one of your regular summer events, not Pennsic, not Gulf Wars. All right, so let's start with Hawke on that one.
So Trimaris, for those who don't know, is the kingdom, it's the state of Florida without the panhandle. So as we say, itty bitty living space. It's not a very large kingdom, either geographically. It's long and narrow, and yes. It's not a very large kingdom either geographically or population-wise. We don't really have that many very, very large population centers. It's not the Northeast. We've got 5-6 baronies. It's kind of small. So we don't actually end up with that much in kingdom melee just because we don't really have the population to support it. You know, if we have 20-30 fighters show up at an event, that's a really big event for us in terms of our rapier fighters. So most of our melee ends up taking place. We do a Musketeers tournament each year, which the format has changed, but it's some version of a number of participants, usually based on points, different points being for different ranks. If you have in rapier, you can have a limited number of points to make as many people or as few people on the field as you want. And we've recently started trying to push scenario-based, more scenario-based melees on that, as opposed to just a line battle, which is often what happens. So things like, you know, making it a bridge and limited front engagement, or making a flag that you have to go hold and timing it, because that's what we tend to see at Gulf Wars. So that makes it a slightly more accurate practice for Gulf Wars, which is our really big melee event.
All right, thank you, Hawke. Oh, that's my voice. All right, we're gonna jump over to Oliver. What does a typical scenario, melee scenario, look like in your kingdom? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
You have to push the button.
I mute myself so I don't make weird noises. When
So we don't hear you make weird noises.
Well, that's different. That's usually accompanied with beer.
The noises are in your head.
Yes. So the difference between East Coast, West Coast, I think primarily is the length of the events. On the East Coast with Pennsic and Gulf Wars, you have a multi-week event, so you can spread things out and have a given day, a single melee type setup. With Petrora War, Estrella, and Great Western Wars, those are less than a week or about a week long. And the fighting days are usually 2 to 3 days of fighting. So we try to cram everything into a day as much as possible. We'll start at 10 o'clock and we'll finish by 4, and we'll do melees all day long. And so what we try to do is give a smorgasbord of everything you can think of. I like to start with a warm-up, kill them all warm-up, and end with a last Spencer standing res battle, so everybody gets enough fighting. And in between, we do everything from open field to hay-built city castles to capture the flags. We try to get a little bit of everything so that everybody has a chance to either just go out and play or strategize if that's the type of game that they like to play.
And I muted myself so I wouldn't make weird noises. All right, thank you.
Make me feel good.
Yeah, just for you. That's some excellent perspective, especially from a kingdom that isn't as hands in all the pies when it comes to Gulf Wars or Pennsic or multi-week events. Next, we're going to jump over to the Mid-Realm, which is another large melee kingdom. Peter, take it away.
Yeah, because we have what we refer to as war season. It's basically once event starts happening outside again in the spring that runs through Pennsic. And most of those will have at least some melee scenarios to play. A lot of the time they'll be based on what we expect to be doing at Pennsic, more general early in the season and getting more and more dialed in as we get closer to war. And we know for sure what the scenarios are going to be. Because we have regional commanders that are in each of the states that comprise the Mid-Realm. Each of them are in charge of taking care of organizing those practices at their events, working with the marshals in charge. So they'll be doing anything that we'll be seeing on the field at Pennsic. So there's a lot of practicing the whole open field, kill 'em all kind of fights, where half the time it turns into the tidy bowl of death. There's a lot of reviewing and practicing how to safely do both sides of limited fronts, like a kill pocket or a doorway. There's a lot of warm-ups and training drills that we do that start off with like Fox and Hounds, 2-on-1 fights, and then growing that into 3-on-5s and kind of talking about how to expand those ideas. So we try to mix up practice and fun and learning new stuff all at the same time.
I have been on the wrong end of Foxes and Hounds too many times.
It's so
Our
much
work
fun.
hand. Right end, whatever you call it. All right, and last but not least is Warwick from An Tir.
Hey, thanks. So we're a really, really big kingdom. It would take you 32 hours to go end to end, top to bottom. No stopping for peas. And so that's a double-edged sword. It means there's always something, every weekend there's something you can do. And because we're the Pacific Northwest, we don't get a lot of snow. And so we have a very long season. And so we have a lot of wars. We do a ton of wars here. We have a ton of outdoor camping events. At minimum, an event will be 2 days. It'll be just the weekend. But we have a lot of long weekends as well. We're also American-Canadian, and we get a lot of cross-border, mostly Canada going down to the States. A lot of Americans don't seem to have passports, but Canadians all do. So we head down the I-5, and there's a lot of great stuff to do down there because the population is very, very high. But we are also primarily a tourney kingdom. So even though we love camping, like our camping events are amazing and massive, thousands of people come to our events, our wars are really glorified tournaments. And so that's realistically what they are, because it's a culture of heroes. Whether it's on the heavy field or whether it's on the rapier field, what you have is this this back and forth, this push-pull polarization between people that want to go out there and be heroes and have that one-on-one experience and stand out and be a cowboy, and the people who are designing the scenarios, who want to gamify things, who want to tell a story, who want that narrative, who want a multitude of different types of experiences. They want to see push battles. They want to see people fighting at the gates. They want to have scenarios that branch given what happened on the previous scenario. And then you've got a whole bunch of people that really just want to find somebody to stab. And sort of making all that work can be very, very challenging for the people that are running it. It's exciting and it's fun. And I used to think we were great at it until I started traveling.
It actually sounds like fun.
It's a really good time. I mean, everyone's out there to have a really, really good time. But there are people, the people who are running these things, like myself, you try to add depth. But as soon as you add depth, you add complexity. And once you add complexity, a lot of people get a little lost, right? And so that's a challenge.
Oh boy, you see Peter nodding, you see me nodding. The Mid-Realm Army can definitely identify with that on a couple of levels. So this is basically, we've talked about standard scenarios, and we've ranged here from like preparing to wars, to cramming in all the fun in one day, to finding scenarios that speak to the hero in us all. I'm gonna open this question to the entire floor of panelists, just real quick. What is the worst scenario that you have ever run in your kingdom, and why?
Oh, can I answer that right off the bat?
Please do.
I had to make a snap decision on a scenario we were going to run because the conditions wouldn't let us run it. So I made up a new scenario on the spot, which was immediately gamed by the people in the scenario. Don't do that. And I'm not talking about the people gaming the scenario. I'm talking about the MIC that made up a scenario on the spot. Just don't do that. Worse.
So what do you mean by gamed the scenario? Can you give us an example?
So
what was the scenario?
I try to create win conditions, right? I don't want people to just line up and just go to the last man standing. Those can be fun, but it's a really easy thing to do, and you can do that anywhere. So typically when I run scenarios, there's a narrative, and you want win conditions, and you want people to think about it. You want to create situations where the tactics inform the strategy. And so when you do that without pre-planning, without being able to at least paper test it, you're almost guaranteed that somebody's smarter than you or better at you than deconstructing these things, or had more time to think about it because they're in the middle of it, is going to find a hinge that they can use to take advantage of the rule set, at which point you pretty much got to scrap it, or people start getting upset, and now nobody's having fun. And so that's not what you want to do.
So adding on to that, gaming the rules isn't necessarily always a bad thing. It's bad when you don't plan for it. So I'll admit, like, when I create scenarios, I literally have a crew of people who are really, really good at finding the loopholes. And I go, how would you break this scenario? Am I okay with that? Yes, I consider that. That's great. Sure. Break the scenario by taking the chest and hiding it in the back. I'm cool with that. Take the scenario by setting the chest on fire. Nope, I'm not cool with that. That's not going to be allowed. Let me write that in the rules. My worst scenario wasn't local, but it was Gulf Wars, and was kind of the same situation where, just because of safety conditions, what was supposed to be the ravine battle turned into something completely else. I might have fought it 2 years ago, and I made a double mistake. One was that I didn't have time to test it beforehand, and two was that someone offered to set it up, and they did, and then I showed up and I went, oh crap, they didn't think a couple of things through. Can we fix this? No, wait, we don't have room. It was just kind of like everything bad came together at once, and it turned into like an injury fest of sadness and doom and despair and mud brawl. Someone just posted in the chat. That's a great name for it, and that's what I'm going with. It was a mud brawl. And we literally ended up halfway through going, nope, we're stopping, we're not doing this anymore. Someone's gonna end up in the hospital. We're not doing this. It needs to stop. And that was not, like, I have nightmares about that thing. It was not a pretty situation in any way, shape, or form.
Having been there and participated in that, it was absolutely just the ultimate combination of bad weather, bad terrain, and not quite flying by the seat of all of our pants, because I remember the marshal call beforehand as well. So it happens, and that's kind of why we want to have this discussion on how we can improve making the games. All right,
especially as somebody who's going to be in charge of scenarios at Gulf Wars.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
This is not.
I don't like it. I've got a deputy.
This whole series is not entirely self-serving at all.
Oh, you already confirmed this last week too.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I was involved in the least fun scenario I've ever participated in. Was also a last-minute change. The battlefield staff for Pennsic was supposed to have been able to provide the MacGuffins to be carried around, the thing to carry to the point to score with. And nothing actually materialized out of that. So the marshal in charge said, it's cool, I'll just grab some pillowcases at Walmart and it'll be fine. I'll throw some sand in them so they don't blow away. And they somehow decided that what we wanted to have was large items, basically like a hay bale, where it took two people to really pick it up and carry it. And if one person's dead, it's not going anywhere. So the battle pace was supposed to be regulated by the restrictions of the items. And instead, we had these 2-pound bags with a nice long handle, and that turned into what we now call sprinting the war point.
Oh, I remember that one.
He
It might
got
be the same
smoked
one.
because his
There have been a couple of
Highness
those.
East is really, really fast. And yeah.
Benjamin.
I never made it to contact with the opposition before the fight was over, before they had gotten enough points back to their score point that the game was over. Because it was literally sprint in, grab it, and run back to your res line. There were a lot of things that were not intended to be done that way, and last minute changes that weren't clarified turned it into nope, run, and game over. And it was awful.
I still remember that one. I remember watching Atlantia just swoop in from the side, namely Benjamin. It was Benjamin. It was all Benjamin.
And a very young
From the
Boris and
side.
Kaylin were just like, "You three, go. We'll catch up."
Mm-hmm.
And I was commanding one of our because I was back in Atlantia then, commanding one of the groups. And yeah, it was that thing like I'm trying to chivvy everybody up there, and I get up there, and there's nothing to do. Like
Yeah,
everything.
it's game over.
All done.
Yeah.
I think for me, the
There were
worst,
like 5 people. It was game over in about 23 seconds.
the worst scenario, I didn't design it. It was at Estrella. They had the Aitenvelters and their allies inside the castle, and everybody else on the other side was lined up like a line at Disneyland trying to get into the one gate, which was a massive kill pocket. It was an unlimited res and unlimited RBG shots. And so we were lined up trying to get to be one of the few people that were up at the front at the kill pocket. People died at the kill pocket, had to go back through our line that was waiting there. Meanwhile, they were firing RBG shots at people at random in this massive line outside who couldn't do anything. And it was a very unsatisfying scenario because it took me an hour to get up after dying 3 times to the kill pocket. I never quite made it to the kill pocket before they ended the scenario.
Oof, that does not sound fun at all.
Unlimited res, like limited front engagements, are just one of those that like that doesn't work for Rapier.
So I usually use unlimited stuff to start.
Mm-hmm.
So people can get their yayas out, they get a sweat on, right? If somebody showed up with 300 shot, it's like, yeah, you'll get to shoot them, right? And all that stuff, and then you get serious. And
Yeah,
you
that's
kind
what
of
we
set it up.
use La Rochelle for at Penzic. So
Yeah, it would have been fine if there's more than just one gate with 5 people being able to play. But an hour of just 5 people at a time, everybody else waiting in line.
Yuck.
I have a memory of a battle like that at Penzic, where it was basically a field battle, and you got some number of hay bales that you could, construct something.
Yep.
And whatever
This
side
one,
I
this
was
one came
fighting
up
on,
2 weeks ago. Also,
yeah, and I was fighting
just
on
one of those
completely
hallmarks of, like,
outnumbered the
this
other
was-
side. And my
Our
memory
queen
is that
decided to take over
he ate icy
and
pop.
built our plan for us. We wanted to offer a nice invitation to make it easy for the East to come in and try to drag us out. And instead she wanted to build a perfect kill shoot. And she did. And it was we just stood there until the marshals made us get out of our fort and get slaughtered because we were horribly outnumbered.
and that was, but like looking at that scenario design just in the book, you can
Mhm.
see that was what was gonna happen.
We didn't expect a queen to take over and be a tactical genius for us.
I will say that's the one thing you can almost never plan for is what is the crown going to do?
Yup.
Because they have a tendency to, with all love and respect to the crown, they have a trump card, and some of them will play it with or without listening to advice about why this trump card may not be a smart move in whatever way.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, technically it's a smart tactical move. In terms of an enjoyment move, it's not a smart move.
Well, so we've touched on a couple of things here with as we lovingly have called it in our very super secret awesome planning notes, the suck. It seems to range from people breaking the rules, whether it be royalty or participants or MICs, to bad scenarios in general, like why would you come out of the building if you don't need to come out of the building? Or why would they go in the building if they don't need to come in the building? Or MacGuffins with track stars. Or just bad terrain, bad luck, bad weather in general. So what can we do to make Melee better? So I think the first question we're going to ask to kind of crack into this tough nut is, why are there so many freaking line fights in Rapier Melee, in our scenarios? All right. I saw Oliver's hands go together like this. Warwick's raising his hand. Let's start with Oliver, because I saw him do the first, and then we'll jump to Warwick.
The problem with having a lot of line fights is either you have way too much open field, or more likely you have too little open field, and people don't have any other choice except to stand side by side. There's no terrain or obstacles to break it up. There's no options to go around, and you just simply sit there and go, well, there's no way to go around the backside of anybody. We cannot, like the armored side does, just smash through the line. So we have very limited options with that. But that, to me, it's a terrain sizing issue.
So I don't have a lot more to add to that, actually. I think what you want is a bigger field than a smaller field, because a smaller field, they will, if you're the first mistake is saying we're going to have an open field battle, because that will naturally become a line battle. People will line up. And if all you say is it's an open field battle, then that's what's going to happen. And if it's a small field, they will expand to the edges because they don't want to be flanked. And in On Tir, we always use death from behind. And so flanking and getting behind is very desirable. And so people want to do it. They're going to want to punch through if they can, or sorry, we ooze through if possible, or they want to flank and get around. But if it's a small field, they will expand right to the edges, so that won't happen to them. And now what you have is a series of duels. And your strategies become more limited at that point. So if you don't want to have line battles, you take a look at the number of people you've got, make sure your field is large enough that they can't actually spread out to that point, because if they try and there's not enough of them, people are just going to walk through the line. And so now you're in a skirmish scenario. Or if you want to make that more interesting, you make secondary goals, right? You make the win conditions not last man standing. So a line battle is fine as long as the win condition isn't last man standing, because especially in On Tir, that just means you're going to have 40 people dueling.
So yeah, we were going to have a follow-on question that you just kind of laid into.
I'll add on to that on the Olympic side of it. The one thing about field battles is they're easy in terms of setup, in terms of people understanding the rules, in terms of it's traditional. This is what we always do. A field battle is you show up, you fight each other. And I feel like that's part of why it shows up so much, at least to golf wars. I know Wistric and I have talked about ways to, what can we do to improve it? But I think that's partially why they show up from an economic point of view. Because with all the love in my heart, while I love scenarios, like great town scenarios that have little buildings that don't look like a D&D battle, like with all the love in my heart, that is a solid hour of usually the marshals hauling around hay bales and begging people to help and hauling around giant rope. And yeah, it is hard. Not that we're not glad to do it, but line battle is the easiest version. You can do it with nothing.
And I think you're right. People kind of expect it, right? It's like, when are we doing open field battle?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tradition.
Yeah. I think there's one more speaker. I have something to add, but I think somebody else, there's at least only 3 of us spoke.
Yeah, it's Grau from the mid-row.
And I think there was a comment in the text chat. I didn't catch who it was from. Virgil was right in a lot of ways. That one of the limitations of rapier is that everybody's blades are within about a foot of the same length. And everybody's arms, with a few exceptions, Simone, everybody's arms are within about a foot of the same length. So the most range differential we're going to end up with to push lines around is really going to be maybe 2 feet. So it's really hard to create pressure points that way and to force your generals, your local commanders to make decisions that create hinges in a line or gaps in a line, other than just simply piling on and pushing and trying to get people to have dumb ideas. But we don't really have a lot of the tools that Armored has to force things to go differently.
May I address that?
No, sorry, wrong Simone. I was sorry, Valbrand.
Render, yeah.
Yeah.
He's in my backyard.
Right.
So I'm excited by, I have to be honest, when I first saw the spears, I didn't like them.
Mhm.
But when I think about the spears, and I didn't like them because while I trust many of my brothers and sisters with a metal sword on the end of a stick, when you get into large melee situations, there's a whole bunch of people that are there on spring break that I don't necessarily trust in the same situation. So phasing those out and bringing in the rubber tips, I think is great. And I also like what they did with the bows. Because the reason the bows didn't really work before was because they said, we're going to use 30-pound bows and heavy ammo. And I've shot rapier fighters with my 30-pound bow because I do combat archery on the heavy field. And they're like, no, I don't want that to happen again, right? But they've dropped the poundage down to 20 with the same ammo. And what that means is you can bring in heavy combat archers onto the rapier field, just authorize them in combat archery or whatever, or more if they want. And now you have something that can offset the spears. So if you've got people out there with spears, you're going to have rapier fighters with shields, and then you're going to have to bring in the missiles to take out the spears. Now suddenly a line battle becomes way more interesting.
Yep.
So that I think is going to change things if you can get the numbers.
If I could,
I think indeed with the spears, you might even get some heavy fighters coming out and trying to play that, sort of like playing a little farm league hockey when they're in the pros. They might come out and just try to get a little ice time kind of thing. Sorry, that's a Canadianism, but I'm sure you guys got it.
Yeah, some of us are close enough to the border.
We have a hockey team somewhere in Mertier's.
what is this hockey talk of?
So we've kind of talked a little bit and touched on this with this question. Why do we focus so hard on tradition? Why do our typical scenarios really look the way they do? Why do we, I know that one of you mentioned you try to pack in an entire day, or like an entire war in one day. So you do the line battle, you do a couple of scenarios, you do everything on top of that. What would change that? Would it be these new rules? Would it be the spears? Would it be timed res until everyone figured it out? I'm going to open it to the entire panel for this. I'm not going to go one by one. So feel free to chime in if you have an answer.
Actually, I'm going to go back and talk to Warwick's point. Back in 2008, we did a 3-year spear experiment with metal spears. It was me and Her Ladyship Mayella Campbell of Caid. And after 3 years, it was put up to the society level and put into the rule set. So we have been playing out here with the metal spears for over a decade. And yes, they do add a strategy and tactic difference to the battle as you would with either archery or RBGs. The difference is, unlike archery and RBGs, you don't lose your ammo with the spear. And so you have that second rank weaponry that we have been lacking. And it's amazing what it can do to a kill pocket or a doorway or a bridge to sit there and do that. It is a great and wonderful thing. And perhaps we're a different kingdom, but between Estrella, Petro, and Great Western War, we've not really had any problems in over a decade with the metal spears. It's like, if you're going to wield it, you become authorized in it, and if you can't do it right, you don't get to play with it.
Why do you
So-
think they're phasing them out? They want
That,
to get to that right now?
that's another 5-hour discussion.
All right, that's not.
Honest, it's a fear of them, much like when we first came out with the Schlagers and the heavy. I heard the same complaints because I came in just as epées and foils were leaving, and we had the heavy rapier blades come out, and what I heard is, "Oh my God, you're going to kill somebody with that! I will not step on the art and the melee field with those out there because you will hurt someone." And that was the attitude back then with our big thing that we now do as standard. And the same thing with cut and thrust. The cut and thrust was not allowed to go into melee because, oh my God, you're going to kill somebody with those things. And the same with the metal spears. We had one incident where we had a line charging in. The guy put the butt of the spear on the ground. This was our first year of the experiment. And we realized that you cannot plant a spear. After that, we had almost zero. And we also had cuts and tip cuts, line pull cuts in there. A lot of what we did was hamstrung by society Earl Marshall, that he took stuff out which made them less effective and less useful all around. And I think it's just a fear of them and not knowing them. I brought them out to Gulf Wars and I got lambasted and chewed at for bringing them out. People just really hated them. It's almost an East Coast, West Coast thing. And by part, I don't know why. We embraced them. I'm glad we did, because now that there's the rubber ones, it is a stepping stone to that. The KRM list was having both, the rule set was supposed to have both of the spears, metal and rubber, and they went up to society, and it was taken, the metal ones were taken out at the last minute, not by the Earl or the Society Rapier Marshal. And it would, if it was left in, my point is, you leave both sets in, each kingdom can decide that they either want both, one, or none. And you leave it to the kingdom to make that decision, rather than edict it down from society to remove what has been really for over a decade in use and practiced safely. But I didn't want to get into that. That's, like I said,
I'm glad you did, actually. It's good to know, and I'm sad for you.
yeah, it's like I said, there's a lot longer and a lot more beers needed for some of that.
We may have an episode planned about like
At least on the list of like suspected
Somewhere in there.
topics.
What was the original question? I think we sidetracked.
There's somebody mentioned that spears, the varied ranges, help to make line battles more interesting.
More dynamic.
But was the question, how do we make them more? I can't remember what the original.
I think, yeah, the original starting point on this was kind of field battles.
The general thing, not just spears.
How do we make field battles not just the
Line
same
battles.
thing over and over?
Oh, going back to having the same actual scenarios over and over again. I think a lot of it is people just say, this is what worked last year, we're just going to do it again. And it sometimes falls into a fallacy as it's worked before, why change it?
Mm-hmm. The other big thing that I've run into with the scale of marshaling Pennsic is that simply convincing people to do something different and to understand a new scenario is really, really hard. I think most people that have spent much time at Pennsic have probably run into a marshal who didn't read the rules, and will just simply come back with a ruling of that's how we've always done it.
Not just Pennsic.
Hmm?
I don't think that's just I don't think
Yeah,
that's
probably not just Pennsic, but especially Pennsic.
I met a lot of marshals that didn't know the rules, or
yeah.
they're still operating off rules from 10 years ago.
Yeah, like this, it's so hard to institute change there just because there's so much institutional inertia. And interkingdom anthropology takes a big hit too.
Well, I think another issue with this is if you have an MIC, so most of the MICs are fighters. And so you've got somebody that's chosen not to fight to MIC. And you're like, yay, we have an MIC. That's fantastic. And for us in An Tir, like we don't have 2 or 3 ginormous wars. We have a giant kingdom, and so we fight ourselves. Our baronies fight each other. We have a ton of baronies. We have a lot of shires. And so we have a lot of set wars that happen within our massive kingdom. And so you just want somebody to run it, right? And so the safest and the easiest thing to do, as you said, is to do the same thing you did last year, because that's what worked. It was safe. People had a good time. We'll do that again. And when you get people that step up and say, you know, I want to do something a little bit different, often there's resistance to that. And so I think that's one of the major problems that people need to deal with. And the reason there's resistance to it is because you've got somebody that comes in, maybe with a gaming background, but maybe they actually haven't thought things through, and people have experience with that. And they're like, you know, the last time somebody came in and brought in a whole bunch of gimmick stuff, it really sucked. So I don't want to do that. I just want my bridge battle. I want my line battle. I want my push battle, because I know that's going to work, and there'll be no crying afterwards.
So someone actually brought up a good point in the chat, which Stuart Waven said, you know, traditional line battles, for those of us who've been fighting, you know, 10, 15 years, yeah, it's something that we've done every bloody year, blah, blah, blah. But for a newbie, a line battle is kind of a nice, safe place for them to start. Like, it is beneficial to a newbie, because it's easy for them to understand. It's an easy battle. You're fighting in a line. You've got your nice little group, you know, to fight with.
Yeah, you're there with your brothers and sisters backing you up, right? You're right. That's a really good point. They're there. You're there in that team environment, and that's actually a really positive thing. I think that's a great point, Hawk.
I remember my first Pinzik, and I couldn't do anything or see anything on the battlefield except there's people across from me. I'm gonna go kill them, yay! And it was a blast.
Yeah, those open field battles are a lot more fun for the sort of rank and file fighter than they are for the commander. As a general, it's awful. Like, you get one chance to sort of influence the flow of the battle by talking to your commanders ahead of time, and then it just explodes, and who knows what's going to happen. And if you're outnumbered, you're just outnumbered. There's no force multiplier there. Like, are you the worst general ever that you accepted battle on these terms? But
the last time that I was general for the Gulf Wars field battle, I had some pretty strong commanders of the various kingdoms. And literally our planning went like this. Okay, we're going to line up like this. Don't put Althamok next to Atlantia, because, you know, Althamok walks and Atlantia runs. Got to line up? Okay. If they push this side, we'll go like this. If they push the other side, we'll go like this. If they push the middle, we'll go like this. Everyone good? Great, let's go. And that was literally the extent of our planning for that. Because there's not really much more you can do.
Yeah, that sounds pretty standard. It's right, you know, you got to trust your commanders and give them an opportunity to make decisions. You explain to them the strategy, and you let them decide on the tactics, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to go back to talking about adding secondary goals.
Mm-hmm.
With and sort of what are some examples of secondary goals that you can add for a field battle to make it beyond what we've been discussing, to make it change from a line fight. And Peter, your comment actually inspired a thought. Can those secondary goals serve as a effective force multiplier?
Theoretically, they can, if you can get people to understand them. I know that sounds snarky, but it's it's the chaos of the battlefield for people that don't spend a lot of time actually fighting melees. It's pretty overwhelming just to keep track of, hey, there's 140 dudes in front of me, and I've got to stick with my 30 dudes. And hey, Bruce, what the heck am I doing?
Hey, this is the reason I carry around binders. And we actually have a question in the chat about, like, what's the upwards limit of effective communication that your commanders can have in a scenario, or happen before a scenario? And it really depends. It depends on the scenario. It depends on how big the melee is. I'll let the panelists take it from there. But in my experience on the field and running things behind the scenes, we find that the more complicated a scenario becomes, or the more people you have participating in a scenario, the upwards limit of communication can be anything from, holy crap, you showed up 2 minutes after lay on, like, here's what you're supposed to be doing, to people who show up the night before for, like, a command meeting and then want to talk about it for 6 hours over a bottle of tequila. Like, it just really depends. And getting 200 people to do that, So I'm going to open that up to those secondary goals. Like, what is too many secondary goals? How do we communicate them better? And how do we implement them into more melees without overwhelming people?
Anything more than secondary is too many.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Oh, yeah.
1, maybe 2 if you're really, really lucky and you got a small little battle like War of the Wings. It's about 60, 70 fighters. You maybe can get away with 2, maybe if you're lucky.
So
So what are some examples of those secondary goals that?
So I taught a class on this, so I'm going to read off of it. You can have race conditions.
Oliver's going to read to us later. So.
All right, you can have your race conditions. You can have, just
Define
survival,
that.
rescue missions, searching and finding something, harassing somebody can be a goal, capturing something, attacking a specific thing and destroying it with a specific condition. I'll give you an example of that. I built an RBG cannon, and what they had to do is get the cannon from one side of the field to in front of the castle and shoot the gate. And once they were able to do that, the gate opened up. So things like that. Chasing something. So somebody's got a head start, you got to catch up with them. And there's a condition attached to actually what catching them means. So there's a ton of stuff you can do. But and if you mix it up, nobody's going to be able to do it. You can only pick one.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about the question about the limits of communication. Also, if you're talking about like how many people can, as general, can you influence on the field directly yourself? The limit that I tend to work with, and that Mid-Realm generally has tended to work with, is you can have about 5 to 7 people probably that can focus on the fight and you. And then each of them can have about 5 people that can pay attention to them, carrying down. And that's kind of how we ended up with our fundamental breakdown into pretty much 5-person teams. And it works out nicely with our number of regions, so that we can keep everything on a reasonable scale. And you don't have to have the entire battlefield. With 350 people on the field, I guarantee that the folks far out on the flanks are never going to hear the general. But their commander might hear their next door neighbor regional echoing a command that they can then relay down to their people. So directly influencing, maybe 5. I would say 5 once you're on the field is probably about your limit for the most part. And there usually aren't people close enough to you that more than 5 or 10 people can hear you.
I usually give my sub-commanders conditions upon which there are a variety of choices they can make. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do that. And if anything else happens, just, here's our overarching goal.
Yep. There's a whole bunch of classes on that, which is a separate, again, 5 hours and lots of booze.
Hey, I wasn't referring to you about that bottle of tequila.
No. No, definitely not.
All right, so we just had someone pop up in the chat and kind of ask a little bit more about the alternate win conditions and some of the pros and cons of those. So instead of opening it up to like a really big list, why don't we have each panelist tell us about their favorite alternate win condition, and like pros and cons, just 2 minutes each, real quick, short, simple, to the point. Who wants to go first?
Favorite. Because I can sit here and I can think of non-favorites. To go the other direction.
You know what? Go the other direction then. What is your least favorite alternate win condition, and why?
Anything that can turn into a sprint. And that's why I went with a slightly secondary win condition, because I don't mind something where you have to get a thing. But in general, the solution when you have to get a thing is that you can't let them take it back to their line, because that's easy, that's a sprint. Mm-hmm. You have to make them take it through the other line in some way. That's how you fix that scenario. Occupying buildings, again, avoid the D&D map. Like, just avoid that. But if you have a limited number of buildings with some fun terrain, that tends to be fun. Like something where you have, and honestly, here's actually the way to describe it. I realize this is very vague. Something where there are multiple ways that you could win it. Again, the field battle, there's 3 things you can do. You go like this, you go like this, you go like this, which is nice and easy. It's good. I like scenarios where it's like, okay, well, we can focus all on this building, or we can focus on this building, and halfway through we could do this. But there's a lot of stuff that can happen and change. That the flowchart has a lot of options. I like those.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's the battle format that I developed for Penzig 42. That's, I think, kind of continued on since then. At this point, there's an open field, a broken field, and also a building or set of buildings that allows your participants to go do fun things according to what they think is fun. If you've got people that want to run around in circles and have an open field battle, they can do that. If they want to play around obstacles, they can do that. If they want to go to the D&D town battle, they can do that. But at the same time, as the fight's going on, the conditions change. You can see how the other side is focusing and make choices based on that. I love giving the fighters and the commanders a chance to make choices. It makes for so much more interesting a fight. And I have to say, I kind of love the D&D town battle in one particular way. It really, really rewarded people understanding the win condition. When nobody understood that the game was to go in and get all the gold, that was a really easy win, even though the mid was outnumbered, because they gamed the rules and nobody on their side said, wait a minute. And yeah, is it kind of cheesy? Absolutely. But a fair fight is one you shouldn't be in.
I am the Baroness of Binders, and I think it is overkill to have to bring a clipboard out on the field as a commander to know which building is which.
The part where it's like, take the barrel to the brewery and the chest to the church. No, that part was ridiculous. But when they did the fight that was just literally go in and grab all the gold and get it off the field, and if whoever ends with the most gold wins, that was kind of awesome. And didn't have to be a sprint fight because there was so much overlapping field.
So to answer Simon from Meridier's question, the D&D town battle, you can see the map.
So I'll talk so that anybody who's got you on speaker view, this is the map of the 50 buildings.
Let me just mention, I've attempted to recreate this in Minecraft, and just for giggles, and like, I'm just already crying for whoever had to set that up. Because I'm 2 minutes into it, I'm like, oh my God, what the hell?
It had 3 different objectives involving 3 very different things.
Well, there are 3 different, not 3 simultaneous objectives.
No.
Right.
No, it was 3 different battles. But so I was the former Mid-Realm Chief of Staff, which means I keep the folders with all the previous Penzig scenarios and the Penzig write-ups that we do to discuss tactics following big wars and what worked, what didn't, and whatnot. Yes, it looks like fun until you realize that there is a key in the folder with 100 line items labeling each building.
So back to the point about field battles being easy or fun for, as somebody who'd been fighting about 3 years at that point, this was fun. This was just, this was nuts, insanity.
Fun, right?
Yeah.
All right. So we've heard from Hawke and we've heard from Peter on their favorite or least favorite alternative win condition. Oliver, Warwick?
I'll go, or Oliver, whatever you want.
You're ahead. I'll follow you.
Okay. So I'm a big fan of metagame. And I'll give you a couple examples of that. So I like a scenario where I think it's really good. So you do your standard stuff, and then you throw a scenario out there where the commanders aren't actually sure what the objective is yet. They know their objective is maybe they need to intercept a messenger, or they need to find something. But once they find that thing, they actually know what the actual objective is. So the first person who finds that thing and gets that objective will now act upon that objective. And the commander who was unable to procure that information is now reacting to what happens on the field. And just all sorts of amazing things can happen at that point. And so I really like the meta feel of that. And I want to give you another example of what a metagame is for me. I ran a whole series of events called Tournament of Armies. And Tournament of Armies was based on the idea of a snowball tournament. I don't know if you guys do snowball tournaments. You do, right? So I fight Peter. Peter wins. He's now the commander of me, right? And two other, and then now we're going to go fight two others, and whoever wins, Peter and I win, and now Peter's the commander of three, right? That's a snowball tournament. Well, we did that with small units, and we also added in a system where everybody could get involved. So you had to build an army that consisted of heavy fighters, rapier fighters, arts and science, service, bardic, and they would all be able to earn points and boons that would go towards the larger war effort. And so in that scenario, you have a multitude of armies. You have, in our situation, we did this for almost a decade. We would have like 8 armies. And so we would do something called counting coup. And in counting coup, originally counting coup meant you would be able to ride up and steal something from your opponent and ride away. And you'd counted coup upon your opponent. In a simplistic form, it may be taking a scalp. So what I did was we had this huge horse park, and I took all 8 armies and I spread them out all over the park. They couldn't see each other, and everybody had an armband on. And you would count coup by collecting armbands, and every armband was worth something. And so the armies were out in this field on their own, and they didn't know where anyone else was. And so now what they had to do was navigate the fields, the forests, these horse paths. They would encounter other armies. Sometimes negotiations would happen. Sometimes combat would happen. And if you didn't pick up the armbands, there were no rewards involved in this. And so the metagame in that was on the spot, they're having to decide what it is that they're going to do depending on the situation. And you may be about to engage one army when another one, and when I say an army, I'm saying there's 10 guys in front of you and there's 10 people behind you type of thing. Figure out what you're going to do with in these different situations. And by gathering those points, you can then use them to buy things like regenerations or negative regenerations or any of that kind of stuff. So that metagame, I think, really adds a lot to the situation for people and makes the strategy and the tactics a lot more interesting. So that's my favorite kind of scenario, is one in which commanders actually have to think about what it is they're going to do on every single move, because it's not as simple as lining up and killing the other guy.
That whole scenario sounds awesome. Like,
Hey,
on
we have a bad idea battle.
well, so I was thinking on the grander scale, the thing that we've got Avery running for the entire rapier community of the known world that he wants to run sounds a bit like that. But damn, how large was this horse park? Just
so I think
what site should I go looking for?
So the rapier, so you would have the heavies out there doing it, counting coup. You'd have the rapier fighters out there doing it, counting coup. Each army would be the commander, the warlord, we called them, because they were. This is a baronial level thing, and they were competing to become the warlord of the barony. But each army would probably be 30 people, right? And so you would have on the heavy field, you'd have well over 100 people, all divvied up into their different armies. Also, you had to buy your army. So, for example, you would be given 10 points to put together your base unit. A knight was worth 2 points. A combat archer is 2 points. Everybody else is 1 point type of thing. So you'd put together your core unit, and you do the same thing with your rapier fighters, your target archers. The target archers would earn negative regenerations, and the arts and science people would earn regens. And so in their arts and science competitions, they would earn 50 regens. You'd come back to the point, and there'd be 50 regens there waiting for you. But then you would go into your scenario, and somebody had earned a bunch of negative regens from their target archers, and they would use it to wipe out all your regens before the scenario started. So anyway, we can talk about that another time. But that's the metagame that I'm talking about, like putting these rules. And actually, here's the most interesting thing. The first year we did it, people were like, whoa, this is very complicated. But they enjoyed it. The second year, like, we got this, we understand, right? And by the time we got to the 8th year, they understood the rules so well, we actually kind of had to stop doing it because they were gaming all the rules because there was so much complexity. And we actually started again with a much more simple, different rule set. But for about 8 years, it ran fantastic.
That sounds epic. And we're definitely going to have to dive a little deeper with our next question. But first, we're going to let Oliver give us his favorite alternative win condition and why.
So rather than repeat what a lot of other people have said, I'm going to go slightly different. Patrol War, which is a baronial war, it's maybe 100 rapier fighters total. So it's smaller, more fun. We do things there that are different. One year I did a entire, everything was planned around Shakespeare. So one of the scenarios was Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet were able to res. Their families on either side, which was the red team and blue team, were not. So Romeo's family could win if they kept, either family could win if they kept Romeo and Juliet from meeting in the middle at the well where the priest would marry them. And by killing out the other side. Romeo and Juliet would win by themselves, and both armies would lose if they met at the well in the middle where the priest was, the marshal, and got married. So the idea is you could kill Romeo or Juliet, and they'd come back and res and run around again, and then you could work on killing it. So it introduced a third force into the field with an alternate goal set. I talk about gaming. This did not go out as quite as I wanted it to, but it was magnificent. Doña Mora, who is now Maestra Mora, convinced her family that they should fight for her for love. And they wouldn't kill her. They just wouldn't attack the other one and eventually wiped out the other side. But her Romeo met her and they won. The second time we ran it, the gentleman fighter who was playing Romeo was doing rhyming couplets as he was attacking and killing the other people. It was amazing, and my jaw just dropped listening to him talk in verse while he's killing people. But it brought in a third victory condition, or a secondary victory condition for a third force on the field that people had to take into account.
That sounds amazing. I mean, when you give people an opportunity to shine like that, right? That's when the no shit there I was stories come out. So that's
yeah.
Love it.
And you got to admit, we are all frustrated actors. We want to sit there and we'll tell these stories. We'll boast. We'll come up and brag when we fight. These are the things that we do, and giving them the opportunity to do that is you're right. That's that story at the end around the campfire. It's like, we did this, and this is what happened. That is a successful scenario.
That sounds like a blast. I've had a couple of events where they've tried integrating things like that, and it's been amazing. So I kind of want to delve into that a little bit with our next question, which is, we have a game tester on panel. We've talked a little bit about the scenarios that are good, bad, and just plain ugly. How do you play test and then subsequently break your scenarios for local events and wars, or for events that have Romeo and Juliet getting married in the town square? Like, how do you plan and play test these? What is your process? I'm going to actually start with our game maker, and then we'll go from there.
So I test it the same way I test anything. You test it. It's a paper test, and whether whether it means you're using Lego, or you're cutting out chits and assigning values to them, and you don't do it alone. You bring some people in, and you work through all the possible scenarios with them, and you find out what your fail states are. It's the win conditions are easy. It's the fail states that are hard to figure out. And so you got to find every single one of them, because if you don't, somebody else will the day of. And it's the most important thing you can do with a scenario, especially if you're building something that's gimmicky, that you've never done before, that nobody has experience with. The reason we do line battles is because that's battle tested. We know it works. So if you do something that nobody's ever done before, you're taking a huge chance with people's day. And so you really, really have to spend a lot of time doing that. So we'll talk about it. I'll spend a lot of time visualizing. I'm very good at breaking scenarios and breaking game rules. What I do for a living is building systems, economic systems, game systems, combat systems, whatever that is. So you build that structure, you put it down, you write it out, you think about it, you visualize it, you think about how you're going to break it, and then you go to the people that you know that are really good at breaking such things, and you work through it with them. And if possible, you even do it at practice. It's like, hey, let's do a microcosm of this scenario at practice and see what happens, see how you can break this thing. And if you do that, you'll be successful. Even if you miss something, it'll be something small, it'll be something minor, or you can even anticipate it. You can even say, I accept that risk, right? Or as Hawke said, it's like, they might try to cheat this way. And it's like, okay, well, how can we make that work? How can we roll that into the actual scenario? That's a judo move, where you take that negative energy and you turn it into something that can actually be positive if you take it into account.
So before I jump to the next panelist, when you're looking at breaks, what are acceptable breaks? Like, what is okay? So we heard Hawke earlier mention that if they want to hide the chest, that's fine, but if they want to take the chest out of bounds, no go.
Fun.
What to you
Set
is
it
an
on fire, I
acceptable
believe.
break, and
Fun.
what must be fixed?
Yeah, it's always fun. The razor. So when you look at a design, when you look at a system, you have a razor, and the razor is always fun. So if there's a scenario that you're imagining, and if you take that razor and you attack that idea, that possibility with the razor, if what's left is fun, then it's fine, right? If your rule, if your idea, if the way you're tackling this if it makes it less fun, then don't do it. You always want to make it more fun for people.
Usually for me, my definition of a bad break, I have two. One is that the other team can't, quote unquote, fix it. So I realize it's a silly example. If you set the chest on fire, there is no possible way for the other team to win. You have broken the game completely.
It's not fun anymore.
And that's my second point, is I go, well, imagine I was, I had just driven 10 hours to Golf Wars, paid all my I'm at Golf Wars, I'm fighting this battle, and the other team does it. What is my initial reaction going to be? I'm going to admit, if they set the chest on fire, I'm going to be pissed. So that's a bad break. If they hide it, my limit on that is kind of similar to Warwick's, is it hidden somewhere that I have a reasonable expectation I could go get it? Garrick mentioned a situation years ago at Golf Wars, similar to there was a woman who fights in a wheelchair, and we're like, she is a great person to hide this chest behind. It's instant defense. But it is something that can be battled against. Someone could find that chest. It's not an impossible task for the other team to come back and get that chest, find that chest, take that chest away. So that's my line between a break and a not break.
Yeah, and that's great. And that's great because ultimately, it's as I said, what you're looking at is, will this ruin somebody's day? Right?
Yeah. Is it still a game or not?
All right, well, let's jump to another panelist about how you play test. So I'm going to jump to Peter next, because Pennsic is its own very special melee animal. And so when I ask, how do you break or play test scenarios for something on the scale of Pennsic, and what are some of the considerations for scaling up from a 10-on-10 melee or 20-on-20 melee or a 50-on-50 melee to a 300-on-300 melee?
Yeah, scaling.
Sorry, easy question, I know.
Yeah, no problem.
Ritual sacrifice.
Well, I before we when you asked me if I wanted to join in on this call, I thought about looking back at some of the negotiation documents and the pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of conversations with both my crown and my people, and also the warlords from East Atlantia and Ethelmark, who were the primary kingdoms at Pennsic, and also the kingdom rapier marshals from those four kingdoms. There's a lot of debate and discussion in there, like, hey, does this feel safe? Does this feel like a good idea? But before we even get to that point, yeah, we're wargaming before we get there. So there's a lot of sitting down with the crown and like, okay, Your Highness, what do you want your war to include? Do you want your war to be super traditional, stand up and fight, and we're going to go out there and trade punches with the other side until there's only one army standing? Do you want something novel and surprising? What are you after? Or the crown coming to you and saying, hey, look, I don't care what you do, but this is going to be a rule, and you don't have any choice about it. I've already talked to His Highness East, and that's just how it's going to be, so live with it. And that happens. And also that happens, and you can't just go out there on the battlefield and be like, hey, y'all, I know this sucks, but the crown said this is how we're doing it. So that's what we got. Because that's not your job. It's not your job to make your crown look bad. Sometimes that involves an unpleasant sandwich later. But yeah, there's a lot of sitting down with, okay, what do I know my kingdom can do well? My army can do small unit tactics. My army is good at all staying together in a big chunk or breaking up by region, and each region moves separately. Okay, what kind of scenarios are fun for people doing that? That was one of the directions we went. Also, years gone now, we did a survey after Penzik too to see what people wanted to do, and got a lot of feedback from something like 400 or 500 rapier fighters across the known world about what they thought was fun in a war and in a scenario, and what kind of rules they enjoyed, what kind of rules they didn't like, so that we could.
Is that data available somewhere? Is that data available somewhere?
Yeah, I should still have it. Yeah, it was a SurveyMonkey thing. It's been a few years ago, but it's probably.
I'd like it too.
Yeah.
Me too.
I'll try to track that down and get it posted. But yeah, it was really interesting to see what people had to say. That's actually where the mixed field battle came from, because there was a lot of that asked for. They're like, I just want to go out and do what I want to do and have opportunities for other people to do what they want to do. And then figuring out how can we make it possible for 350 to 400 people to understand the fight, have fun fighting, and be safe fighting all at the same time without it being easily breakable. Every once in a while we fail at that, sprinting the war point, or that bizarre banner push we did a couple of years ago that turned into a quagmire. But we tried to wargame that. That one, the banner push, we tried really hard to wargame it, and it still worked up to about 100 fighters. But when you changed it to 300 fighters, it broke down, and there was no way to see that real clearly ahead of time.
What broke down at 300? Or...
the fact that it was just impossible to get to the banners.
Mm-hmm.
Once one banner made it across and scored, everything just locked down, and both sides
So is that
realized.
also a field proportionality thing?
What's that?
A field proportionality issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
How could you have anticipated that?
Honestly, it was something that we kind of considered, and nobody thought, well, no, nobody's just going to decide to stop fighting and sit on home base, because that's no fun. And we overestimated the commitment to winning rather than going out and having fun. So we could have foreseen it. You're right. Yeah, I misspoke.
No,
there.
I wasn't critical. I was just like,
no, you're right there.
You know, so it sounds like you actually did consider it. You just didn't weight it heavily enough.
Right. Yeah, we didn't weight it heavily enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it turned out that was exactly what they did, and it was a winning strategy. It was totally reasonable and legit. It just wasn't much fun.
So people will always go for the win, right?
Yeah.
Not always, though. It
Always,
depends
yeah.
it depends how crazy the scenario is,
Mhm.
or if they remember what the goal is. A banner is easy. MacGuffins or bags of gold might not necessarily be. And
Right.
figuring out what people are going to do is, I think, part.
It also depends on the nature of the event. Like at
Right.
a war, even if all the rapier fighters, rapier commanders, rapier marshals are sitting there saying, "Let's have fun." Yeah, let's have fun. There's entire kingdoms' egos on the line,
Mm-hmm.
and
Some of the crowns out on the field that day were super angry about the way it went down, and some of them were like, "Wow, that was perfect. That was awful, but it was exactly the right solution."
Mhm.
I think there's also some cultural difference between different wars, different kingdoms.
Oh yeah.
Like how seriously one kingdom takes it versus another kingdom. How seriously like Penzik is versus Gulf Wars. versus War of the Wings. I mean, my household shows up at War of the Wings because it's the only thing we can all fight together. We don't give a crap about winning. We're just like, wee, fight!
So is
Bonus
it,
point that they let us be a third party.
It's true. They wouldn't let us win that year. They mean.
so I've heard this said as a poor colonial coming in from An Tir to Gulf Wars. I've heard people say Gulf Wars is like the warm-up for Pennsic. And that's why Gulf Wars is more fun, because people are like, we're here to have a good time, we're warming up, we're working stuff out. And then once Pennsic happens, everyone's like super serious and focused. And it gets a little less fun.
I think Gulf Wars is less serious.
It is. As a mid-realmer who has been on command staff now for a lot of years, many years, I can tell you, we roll up to Gulf Wars and go, not our war, not our problem. Hey, Hawk, where do you want us? Mm-hmm. Like, I definitely can agree with that. So we haven't heard from Oliver on this question. How do you break or play test your scenarios for local events?
So we do a combination of everything that people talked about. The advantage of Petrero being a baronial war is it is a training ground to get people to learn how to run and become the person running the event. And we have mentored people going forward with that. And for Petrero, it is all about fun. It's just a matter of people coming out, having a fun time. We come up with interesting stuff. Everybody has a great time there. When you get to Estrella or to Great Western War, it's a bit more serious because you have different kingdoms involved, but nothing approaching the level of a Pennsic. My first trip to Pennsic was like, oh my God, you guys are serious. Self-editing here.
If you have a complaint, you can submit that in triplicate, please.
Hey, it's got to be stamped and notarized. Thank you very much before it goes in my files.
And Bruce has the forms for you.
I do.
But what we do is we'll sit around, somebody come up with ideas, we'll hash them out as a group. We'll play test it at the local baronial practice with what we can, because you've got 15, 20 people there, you can't do much. Caid has a history of having war practices. We used to have a more adversarial role against Atenvelt with Estrella War. It was very, they had war points and it was very serious there, not the level of Pennsic, but it was serious. And so we would have quarterly war practices. We would go out and do the melee, and this would be the time for us as a kingdom to split the kingdom in half and play test some of the scenarios that went out. And you could do those 3 or 4 times a year. You then have the ability to get a micro scale version of your scenarios tested out enough to get it to the point where you can go forward with them.
So you teach classes on scenario design. You've put a lot of thought into this. Do you have my developer brain's thinking of it as a sandbox, an internal play test that you put scenarios through, and what does that look like?
Okay. Without going into class, which I think I'm going to have to now volunteer to teach at the VAR in a week or two, I break everything down into pieces. Terrain, the size of the thing, what the goals are, because if you think about it, we really do have all of our scenarios come down to either a line battle, a town battle, a forest battle, or they have a goal where you capture the flag. All these things are the major pieces, and it's how you put them together and what you call them and what other little things you tweak them with going forward. So yeah, for me, I've got all these things out, and then I take the resources and the limitations and combine them to come up with something. I try to have a theme they're going to work around to give some interest to them and make things a little bit different. One of the other
question: do you try to tell a story?
Yes, but at the same time, I try not to make it overly complicated. I will actually draw up a paragraph on what each scenario is, and then I have 6 or 7 things on what's in it, whether or not it's the their RBGs or spears, whether or not it's a res battle or a limited res battle or not, what the victory conditions are. And all these things are listed out for each individual scenario. So it is actually down on paper and can be discussed. I had another thought and I forgot what it was now. But yeah, in my brain, I try to work things out ahead of time, and I'll try to break my own scenarios.
I think the question was, do you have a mind castle?
Mind castle.
That's
term.
the Sherlock reference. He was asking if you have a sandbox in your mind where you play test these things.
So yeah, like you say, okay, I'm going to run X.
Yeah.
Then you start a process where you think, okay, so if I'm, you know, trying to win it this way, that let's say you provided 2 win conditions, I'm trying to go for this win condition. What are the exploits? Do you start working through a process for analyzing the scenario you've built?
Yes, maybe not to that level of breaking it down that much, but I do try to go through that process, and I'll try to break my own scenarios in my head.
That works. So I'm going to hop from you to Hawk, because we've heard about Penzic, we've heard about local events, we've heard from our professional game designer. Hawk, what are some of the considerations for playtesting and breaking scenarios for Golf Wars? We've had a lot of comments in the chat about it being more laid back, so.
Yeah, it's fine. So mine is kind of similar to Warwick's. There is, for what it's worth, a Facebook group of generals who, anyone who's added to this group saying, I mean, should try.
Hawk, can you hold on a sec? I don't know if it's just me, but we're losing you. So
I think she's buffering.
yeah, give it a sec, girl.
Oh,
Nope.
yeah.
Is she frozen for everyone else?
Yes, I think it's cyclic for her that sometimes that happens.
Yeah, it happens on Monday nights, but she recovers. Let's give her a minute.
All right.
Because I'd like to hear from her.
I would too.
Can you hear me?
Little bit.
Almost. You're coming
Better?
back.
She is. We have a 404 error in our.
Oh.
Oh.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Hawk 404. There she is.
There.
Yay!
Hey. All right, we're listening.
There we go. So, don't know where I got cut off, so I'll start from the beginning. Mine's kind of similar to Warwick's. Anyone who's ever been a general at Golf Wars gets added to this Facebook group. I don't tend to kick people off of it afterwards, even when they quote unquote retired. And I have certain people that I know are just good at breaking scenarios. Like, it's just how their brains work. Connor the Gypsy is an example. Changed it. Damn Connor is a great example of that. A couple of Atlanteans. I spend a lot of my summers up at Atlantia, so I know a lot of them up there. Pretty much anyone I can find, and I will completely admit that when I get my hands on them, I find a 5-year-old and ask them, how would you break this? Because they tend to be really good at it. And so once we get this scenario, I kind of go through it in my own head and go, well, how would I break it? I try to fix all of those. And then I hand it to my people. I go, here, what questions would you have? How would you break it? What would you do? What would you do if you were intentionally, like, put on your hat of being a really mean, stupid person who just cares about the win and not honor? What would you do? And usually we don't have too many surprises. I mean, I get some occasionally. I'm like, wow, we didn't expect that. But for the most part, that group manages to hit anything that would most people think of.
I know I've been the asshole for the mid-realm a couple of times, excuse my language, because I came from the East originally. So they asked me to break like you would if you were Eastern. Sorry, Oliver, I jumped on top of you. What was your question?
No, I was just going to add, we usually have 5 or 6 people when we are at the event, and the last minute, and we say what's going on and give the scenario. We'll have people who are not bashful to pop up and go, well, what about this? And we either can give an answer right away, or make a very quick decision on yes, no, that can or cannot be done.
Those people are a gift.
I love those people.
So that's the trial by fire for the people running it, is to be able to make a decision on their feet within a second's notice to determine how they want their scenarios to run.
So I will admit that those are the people that I recruit for my pre-testing. Like, those are the people I'm like, I need you, so I can at least have, more than 10 seconds to make this decision. You'll always run into some version of that, but that's who I grab.
Well, this is a perfect segue for the last formal question I'm going to ask tonight before we get into No Shit There I Was stories and the Q&A from the chat. The last question, we've heard a range of things from trying to tell a story with Melee, to sometimes the rules really suck, to just making people happy or not letting people be jerks on the field. How can we make Melee scenarios better? And I'm going to just open that up to all four of our panelists. And have at.
I mean, this sounds terrible. My initial answer is not very politically polite. And I hate to say get the crowns out of the decision process. Like, that's not a polite way to say this, but I've had years at Golf Wars where that would have changed everything. It's like telling the crowns, look, you're great, I love you. You've picked up a rapier once in your life for 20 seconds. Please stop telling us what to do. And I think we've all ended up with some version of that, of the crown going, I've got a great idea, we're gonna do RBGs. And we all go, please, no, please, Your Majesty, please, could I talk you out of this, Your Majesty? No, RBGs are great. And we go, okay. And like Peter said, and then as the Armic, it's your job to kind of go out there and be like, RBGs, you're all gonna love this. I swear. I really
Especially on a bridge.
RBGs on a bridge. You're gonna love this, I swear, and try your best to support it and make the best of it. But that extra layer of somebody else making the decisions, who, no matter how much they're trying to help, because they are, I know it comes from a place of love, theoretically. It can just, pardon my language, it can just fuck it completely up. Just totally and completely, and it's like, yeah.
Yep.
So, and I don't know if we'll ever get a realistic version of that to actually happen. My favorite crowns to work with are the ones who are like, hey, I kind of want to see this, I kind of want to see that, but let me know what can I do? How can I make this the best for Rapier? You tell me. I'm here to consult with you. And so I don't know if we have anyone on this list who is serving his crown, who has ever served his crown, but yeah, letting the, I hate to say this, letting the experts be the experts. Like,
there's somebody in the chat who served his crown, and he said amen to what you said. So I think that's...
Well, there we go.
They're not going to take away your birthday.
Hi, Bart.
PLQs, no take-backs. Avery says so.
do you believe everything Avery says?
Oh, I do.
It's on a mug. It's got to be true. I can buy it on a mug.
So I'd like to weigh in. Go ahead, Oliver. No, I always speak before you. You go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh my God, I love that.
Dale, who was so polite.
Fight.
All right, mine is very simple. So
somebody's supposed to say sorry.
When I started playing in Rapier, Melee is what brought me into the SCA, and I very, very quickly, and I was already making games at the time, and I very, very quickly figured out ways to take advantage of the rules that were there. And then I started doing service, and I became a champion, and I became an MIC, and I realized that all that shit that I'd done had broken everything. And so I realized I had to fix it. And one of the things that I did to fix it was RBGs. RBGs are way OP. And so most people just say, we're not going to play with RBGs. And that's too bad, because they can actually be really fun if you do them right. So one of the things I did was I came up with a convention. And the convention was this. I brought both commanders to me, and I said, bring me all of your shot. And pour it on the ground and count it. And both sides did. And by that point, we were in massive RBG détentes happening. It was just ridiculous, right? We were in gun wars, and this was literally my and my household's fault, because this was the scenario that because we'd figured out you could win with these things. You could really easily win with these things. But now that I was running the war, and there was, we had 120 people in the field, and they were all very invested in this. It was like, we have to fix this because this is silly. Nobody's happy at the end of it. And so I had them counted up, and one side had 45 shot, and the other side had 300 shot, which is case in point of why it was why things weren't working. And I said, okay, guys, both sides have 45 shot. For the entire war, no gleaning. Use them whenever you want. We have 8 scenarios. It fixed it. Totally fixed it. So I'd say, how do you make scenarios more fun? Is you look for the things that make scenarios not fun, and you fix them.
So it's almost an East Coast, West Coast thing, or inter-kingdom anthropology. The crown of Caid and at our wars, both Potrero, Great Western, and even Estrella, the crown come out, and if they want to, and they'll play with us, but they don't actually try to mold it in their format. They don't tell us, oh, well, I want you guys to do this. They're like, how can I play? Because they're just excited to come out and, grab a rapier blade and poke at people, sort of half incognito and half not, even though they've got their retinue around them. It's like they're obviously the crown. We treat them as a target on the field, but they don't. I mean, it's coming out and telling us, well, you guys need to change this scenario. It's not something I've ever seen out here.
It may be something that shows up, and I'll admit, it tends to show up the larger the war and the more crowns that are in any way of all. Like, I don't think I've ever had a crown. I've had one, let me phrase that. I've had one single crown who's ever in any way tried to influence what melee looked like at a local event, kingdom event. And it was literally, they said, I don't want giant shields. That was the extent of their thing. But once you get up to stuff like Golf Wars and Penzik, where there is some politics involved in it, that's where you start seeing that sort of thing, I feel like.
Yeah, there's so much ego involved at that point.
And they forget it's not about them. It's about all these people who have taken the time to come have fun in their vacation. And that's where I sometimes, it's another political discussion about the crowns and their responsibilities, but that's another night.
A little bit more alcohol. Oh no, that'll be Fighting the World after dark. We will not be recording that session. So Oliver, I want to follow up on something you said earlier, where you talked a bit about how you want to try to tell a story with scenarios. Is there any way we could incorporate that throughout the known world a little more to make Melee better? What would you suggest for someone trying to write that scenario right now?
And could we put it in a war?
Yeah. I think the answer is, you want to say something, Hawk?
So the only kick that I'll put on that, it's kind of a general thing, is we have one, when you mentioned the Romeo and Juliet one, Golf Wars has that, the Montagues and Capulets little, it's not a war point, it's a melee. And I've got people who love that, and I used to fight it, and I absolutely loved that battle. And I've got people who despise it, who are like, ugh, this story and this, I just want to kill people. I don't think you're ever going to please everyone. I will put this out there, that if anyone has a melee scenario that they would like to run at Golf Wars, not necessarily the war point, but just for giggles, let us know. Like, I can't speak for Wistric, but I'm going to anyway. We will take it. Name one, I'll help you play test it, whatever the heck you need. People love those sort of things that are optional. Let us know. We will gladly help in any way to make that happen. Congratulations, you have a test dummy field.
and that's what it takes is to have something that you can put in there. Because even though we can play test this at the Baronio and Kingdom level, until we actually get out there and have something that is at an actual war level, you don't know everything, and you don't know how people think. I will say that Caid on the armored field, which is no longer my background, they are primarily simply, they want open field, they want bridge battles, and they want castle battles. And for Patrol War, even though it's a fun war, they have open field, bridge battles, and castle battles. Every once in a while, somebody will come along and go, hey, I want to do this war that happened in 1493 over here in Germany. We're just going to kind of do this. And the armored guys are like, no, I just want the fight. So we have a range. Everybody's on a spectrum of whether or not you just want to go punk somebody, or you want to go have fun, or you're a tactician, or you're a gamer. We're all on there somewhere, and you're not going to get everybody to be happy. If you have, and this is why I like to have a spread of things to offer everybody any given day, is that everybody will find something that they enjoy, even if they don't enjoy the whole thing.
Warwick, your hand went up.
Yeah, so often in the same situation. And one of the things that I do, I love the idea of a narrative in your day or in your 2 days of war. And one of the things you can do is, you know, you look at your audience, you're like, okay, these guys, they want a bridge battle, they want a field battle, they want a castle battle, they want a gate battle. You can use that, and you can still tell a story with that. A push battle is a great way to do that. I'm sure everybody knows what a push battle is. You push for, you know, you start at the bridge, and if you win, you move to the field, and if you lose, you go back to the bridge, and if you win, you go back to the field till you get to the castle, and back and forth. But one of the things you can do is you can have branching scenarios that use all the standard battle formats that people are used to. But if you win here and you get maybe this secondary condition, there's a couple of choices that can happen. You can maybe go to the bridge, or you can go to the field, or whatever. By adding, I think, personally, by adding those narrative elements to your fights, you invest people more in what's happening. And so it's not so much, oh, I have to think about my tactics, and that's tiring, and oh, the strategy is very, very, it's not what I want to do right now. But if you can engage them in a simple story like that, where there's a couple of decision points that they can make, I think you can start to bring them into that type of thinking. Things can become a lot more interesting. I just find the engagement is much higher when you do things like that.
All right. So last but not least, Peter, let's go. How can we make melee scenarios better?
Well, to hit the opposite unpopular opinion from Hawks, also we need to get better as a community at doing rapier melee and doing melee in general. We need to understand tactics better across the board. And it's one of the big frustrations that I've had is the people that are like, I don't like melee, I like single combat. I don't like single combat, I like melee. They both have so many overlapping ideas. And a lot of the way that I think about the army on the field when I've got 200 people behind me going, okay, what are we doing, boss? Is a lot of the same way that I think about the fight when I'm walking onto the field with, say, a sword in my right hand and a dagger in my left hand. What can my sword do? What can my dagger do? What is my opponent's stance telling me about what they're doing? What are their threats telling me versus what we can project? And how are they likely to react? All of that stuff comes from understanding the fight on the individual level, to understanding it on the small unit level, to understanding it on the baronial scale or regional scale, up to understanding it on an inter-kingdom army scale, where you're like, I've got 90 mid-realmers, and I've got 40 Ethelmark, and I've got a smattering of other smaller kingdoms that have come in. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to have Oliver in there with us. It's been a minute, but but if we can all understand how the fight works better, we can all go out there and have better fights. People are going to be less frustrated. We're going to have a lot less people blowing their top on the field and being angry about what's going on because they didn't understand, or they got caught by surprise from somebody that hit them from 179 degrees over their sword shoulder, and they had no idea they were there, but they were still an angle. As you get more familiar and more comfortable on the battlefield, you become more aware of those things. Yeah, you can still get surprised. Like I said earlier, if you're in a fair fight, you shouldn't be there. But somebody is going to be in the wrong fight every time, and your job is to make sure that's not you. And the better my opponent is at making sure that it's not them, the more interesting the fight is for me, and the more interesting the fight is for my unit or my region or my army. That's why we've been in the mid-realm trying to really push talking between the kingdoms. Like, we built friendships that didn't really exist in that way before between the mid-realm and the East's command staff. For instance, it used to be super antagonistic, and it was all about how can I wind them up the best and screw them over the worst in negotiations. And for the last quite a few years now, it's been a lot more about, hey, how can we make this a fun fight for your guys and for us, so that both sides have a chance to win and can play to our strengths while we still build a really awesome battle. And it's a little bit more meta than how do we build a specific scenario, I guess. But I think that's the foundation to making it more fun for everybody, personally.
Wait. The exchange program is working?
A little bit, yeah. You're mostly a mid-realmer now, Bruce. It's okay.
I'm sorry, I'm still too Eastern to be mid-realm.
I know.
I mean,
Do you make the vroom vroom the shoom shoom sounds when you swing your sword?
No.
So-
No, I'm sorry. So for background for everyone, Peter was the general when I moved to the mid from the East. And at my very first war camp, which was absolutely like, I was not into melee. I was a Eastern thug from South Jersey who liked to fight tournaments and do drills. Show up to my first war camp, and the first thing he says to me when I started DFBing some people was, "Ugh, you're too Eastern to be mid-realm." it was just the disparage in his voice. So every time I get a chance to crack that joke at him, I do.
I mean, for what it's worth, years and years ago, there used to be a thing in Antiora where the equivalent of a Vivat cheer was Vivat, death to Trimaris. And that was like part of their culture. I remember a guy that I knew who literally, like, I'd made friends with him at one Golf Wars, and he came back 2 Golf Wars later with a Triskel tattooed on the bottom of his foot so that he could stomp on Trimaris every day. And he knew I was Trimerian, and he was showing this to me proud of it. Like, he didn't even consider, like, holy crap, really? And I don't even know who the crown was, but there was a crown in Antiora who kind of realized this and kind of went, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore. That's not cool. That's going too far. And so I think that kind of changed it a little bit. It's part of why we kind of try to make Golf Wars, we claim the war and hospitality down here, and it's part of trying to stop it from being too ridiculously competitive, which is what we like, and everyone likes something different, and that's okay. Like, it's okay that that with all the love of my heart towards Bruce, when she's talking about, oh yeah, I got this binding, we counted how many minutes it takes East Realm to take 3 sips of water so that we could time up. I'm like,
hey, I was following instructions from my crown. Thank you very much.
I'm
Yes,
sure
Majesty.
you were. But I will admit, like, my face kind of went, okay.
This Batman files are
and
useful
that's okay.
sometimes.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
We have some crazy data now, though, because of it. And then we went back and went, maybe we should teach people that melee isn't an individual fight, but a team sport. Yeah.
So we are coming up towards the end of the second hour. Means it's time for 2 things. First, our panelists know shit there was stories about your absolute favorite scenario ever that you've ever fought in, and Q&A from the audience. There's been a lot of chatter going on in the chat script. Thank you. If you have a question that we haven't answered, please go ahead and post it to the group chat, and we'll get to it after the no shit there was stories. So,
Make Oliver go first.
Oliver.
Okay, I'm going to do 4 things. My first attempt at doing anything with doing scenarios was at an Australia War when I was very new, back in 2005. the day was done with everybody was finished with scenarios, and they had a bear pit. They had 4 bear pits and a line of 100 fencers all waiting to get in it. And it took like 20 minutes to get up here just to fight a couple fights and get back out again. And a lot of us were bored with that. So the armored had left their hay bale castle for the day. And so we pulled like 40 people out of the line, and I started creating scenarios on the fly. And what came to me at some point is I had all these RBGs. This was back when RBGs were big and everybody had guns with lots of ammo. And they go, we want to play 2. But I didn't have enough marshals to keep the entire field straight. So what I did is I put them in the center. We created a small fort, called it the Alamo, and with a bunch of fighters that wanted to fight with them, and all the RBG people were there, and we had powder monkeys that could go out and glean shots off the field you could not kill, that could come back and just keep them firing. So the large force on the outside was attacking the Alamo with unlimited shots from the inside. It made for a happy set of people that don't normally get a chance to fire all of the shots they want. My favorite scenario I ever came up with is what I call the drunken captain. This was when I was doing a whole seafaring, because my barony Calafia has a sea serpent, so we did a whole seafaring thing. The drunken captain. And what it was is I had 5 volunteers that would play drunks in the city. They each had a bag. 3 of the bags had just a flower lay on, and they were just drunks. And 2 of the bags had either a red sash or a blue sash, and they were the captains. Now this will not work in a war that you have to win, because obviously it's an escort the noble. And in a bigger war where there's a war point, you just take the captain and you rush him back to your side and you win. Not here. This was play acting to the max. Before we even started, they were out in the town staggering around. I had one guy pretending to throw up in his mask before we could hit lay on. And the captains, you could not kill them. If you killed them, they go down for a 3 count, came back up because they were drunk. They are armed with this dagger. Everybody else had no reses, and the captains would argue with the people trying to rescue them. And the play acting was so immense. We did this 5 times during the course of the weekend because people wanted to keep playing it over and over. And we've had a version of this every war since, both at Potrero and Great Western.
Do you have a write-up for it?
Yes.
You should post that somewhere so we can steal it.
That goes into my 3rd point is I have a Google Drive where all of my Rapier scenario class information and all the scenarios that I've done are posted there, and I can share that at some point, or maybe I'll save that for a reveal in a future class teaching here. Also I have in there from An Tir a Rapier scenario doc by Casey Stalter. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, Casey doesn't play anymore.
Okay, he had gathered together a whole bunch of scenarios to share, and I think it's something that we need to do is get a database of all these scenarios somewhere that we can share, and people can look at them and go, hey, that looks interesting. I should be able to play that or modify it.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
And I forgot my 4th thing, so I'll shut up for now. Next.
Is this the no shit there I was stories?
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be.
Absolute bestest scenario you ever saw, fought in, whatever.
So mine's a little long, so I don't know. I can go now or I can wait.
I ain't got nowhere else to be.
All right. Okay, so I started out as a fringe player, and we were lucky that the leader of our household was actually a Olympic fencing coach. And so we spent a lot of time in schoolyards practicing, because in the Pacific Northwest you can do that 8 months out of the year. And we didn't go to a lot of events for a while. We were mostly just about the sorting. And then he's like, I got out of the SCA a while ago, but really, there's a whole bunch of us now, and there was like 10 or 12 of us that were meeting 3 times a week and sorting with these guys. And this is when we were transitioning from fiberglass to epes and things like that. And so we started going to events, and we realized very, very quickly that even though we were fringy, we were actually quite dangerous because of all the training this fellow had given us, and we became quite a commodity because we were mercs, and people were paying us in like food and booze and sparklies and things like that for us to fight on their side. And as our household grew and grew and grew, the payments started to become onerous because people were dumping real money into this. It was like this. It started to become too much. We thought the fun was starting to come out of it. So we came up with this plan, and we realized that in this war, this is the Clinton War in northern BC, in which 1,000 people would show up. This is a humongous event for this part of the country, and it was the event to go to. And so we would have several hundred rapier fighters in the field, and there'd be hundreds and hundreds of heavy fighters in the field. We had a castle. It was an amazing event, beautiful in the evening with all the pavilions and stuff. And this is in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And so we came up with this plan. We called together all the other mercenary households, and that was like 3 main ones. So there was a ton of other mercs that were just random, but we called up the commanders and we said, look, there's this thing that we want to do. We've realized that there's as much of us, there's as many mercs as there are like main players, cadets and white scarves and all their households and stuff. There's as much of us as them. And traditionally what happens is whichever side can afford the mercs wins. And we think that kind of sucks. So we created this whole scenario, this whole narrative where we invited both sides into our household to bid for our services. But what we did was we called all the other mercs into our camp first. And they came, we said, so here's what we're gonna do. We want you guys to all arm up and you're gonna line both sides of the roads. We had 60 fighters in full kit lining the road when the two royalist sides were approaching our camp to buy our services. And so they had to walk through this gauntlet of all of these fighters to get to our camp. And we had a full pavilion set up with table, food, wine. We had serving boys and girls with food and everything. It was lovely. It was gorgeous. They had no idea what was going on. They didn't have a freaking clue. They thought they were bidding for 60 people. But we had all 3 of our war commanders there. And every time they made a bid, we just said, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. And we were shouting it at this point. We had like RBGs strapped to our chests and things. And finally, the Baron of our barony, Lionsgate, he finally, because I think at one point, one of us said, we could take it all. And you could see the light bulb go off in his head, and he turned to the other, his opposition that he thought he was going to fight against, and he said, they can take it all. They think they can take it all. They're going to take it all. And they got it. And they realized what we were proposing was a mercenaries versus the royalist scenario. And so that's what we actually did, was we lined up, and they lined up in classic line battle format. And it was all freaking white scarves and cadets in their households. Like, it was a pretty scary setup, right? Because we're all fringe players. But we got a bunch of RBGs, and we had war shields that we'd created, all these large triangular war shields. And I was in command. And so I had all my shields in the front, and I had 1 unit of mercs on my left, and I had 1 unit of mercs on my right, and I had a reserve behind. And here's what I'd said. I'd said, look, Josie, who's running our left flank, is actually cadet to Don Prosper, whom you may know as Devin Boorman, who runs Academy Duello. And I said, and I don't actually trust her not to turn on us at this. This is 1998, just so you know. I don't trust her to not actually turn on us in this point, because she's the only cadet we have on our side. The rest of us are just a bunch of assholes in Renaissance clothing. So I put a whole bunch of our people in her crew, and then the lay-on happens. And we've got all our shields. We've got the second row that I'm in. We've got Jack's forces on the right, and they're all RBGs. We got Josie's force on the left. We're advancing towards the line, and Josie's forces are lagging behind. They're lagging behind greatly. They're behind us at this point, and I figure it's going to happen. They're gonna jump us, and it's just going to happen. And I figure at this point, because I'd put 3 people in her forces to take her out if this is what was going to happen. And I told Gwydion, who is behind us, our reserve, that, pick a side, but if Josie turns on us, you've got to go and mow them down. So I'm like looking at Josie because Josie is not bringing her forces forward, and my forces have engaged the center, which is all white scarves and cadets. And so I'm looking at Josie. I'm like, Josie, come on. And then I turn back, and our front line is gone. They've just all been killed. As soon as we made contact, they were just destroyed. They were wiped out. So now we're fighting. We don't know what's happening. I'm fighting at that point with a very long deltin and a baton. I managed to sweep some blades, kill my good friend Draven. I'm then wiped out. Our whole center is gone. We're off to the side to watch what's happened. Jack's forces have also been wiped out. But here's the beauty of this is Josie didn't turn on us. They were just a little nervous about what was going on, and so they lagged behind. Gwydion's forces went and supported them, and we decimated the center to the point that Gwydion and Josie's forces were able to actually mop up the rest of the field. And so this was one of my favorite stories because these were all fringe players, mercenaries, northern fighters, people that didn't get to come to a lot of practices, and we defeated the royalist forces. We beat up the White Scarves, we beat up the cadets, we completely, well, it was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. I think there was 8 of us left at the end, but anyway, we won it. So it was pretty amazing. So that's my no shit that I was.
Excellent. Hawk, you're muted.
This story comes with the caveat that I have told this story several times. I've told it to someone who was in this story who claims that they were not nearly as cool as we make them out to be. And I told him to shut up because, yes, of course he was. And it happens at War of the Wings. I feel like most of my great melee stories happen at War of the Wings. A below in India that takes place in Boonville, North Carolina. And my household shows up, and a rumor has started of my household that we just show up with a gazillion mods from around the known world. And unfortunately, it's becoming more and more true every year, but that's not how we started, we swear. We were all cadets when we started. We bring a fairly sizable force and invite all our friends. This was one of our early years, and it was a boat battle. So we had a boat set up, had 2 gangways that came out of this boat. The boat had gunnels. One of the rules was that you may not fire under the gunnels because RBGs was a big thing at the time, in that time. So we started on the outside, and it was, kill everyone type battle. And we marched our way, we started on the side. We marched our way down one of the gangways, killing everyone in our path with our team. I turned to the marshal and we're like, can we go up the other gangway and just squash people? And they're like, yeah, sure, do it. So, we did. Squish, squish, everyone dies. Worked great. We have conclusively proven you may go up and down these gangplanks. You don't have to stay on the ship. Next battle, whoever was commanding our side, which was not me, decided that they were going to do a volley fire. But they made one terrible mistake, which is that they put the people who were doing the volley fire in front of the people with swords and didn't have a plan for how they were going to get out of the way. This is an important thing to plan if you ever want to do a volley fire. So the volley fire fired, hit almost no one, and the people on the boat fired back and killed 90% of our troops in 2 seconds. It was a massacre. At the end of those 90 seconds, here's what I am left with. I am left with myself with 1 arm, my dagger arm. I was smart enough to switch my sword to that hand, and 2 riflemen. And on the other gangway is then Donna Dawn, now Master Dawn from Atlantia, who has also been armed, has decided, nope, he's too cool. He can just do this with his dagger, and is using what I can only describe as offhand newbie. It was this new little fighter, quaking in her boots. She's got a rifle. You can tell she's just like, oh God, what am I gonna do? I can't. Oh my God. I did not witness this. I was busy on my side. And in my head, I'm going, okay, they're gonna come down the gunway and they're gonna kill us all. We're dead in 10 seconds. Wait, they're just kneeling under the gunnel. That's weird. Are they not gonna? I guess they're not gonna come after us. Okay. And so I turned to my gun and I was like, oh, okay. You guys both loaded. We're gonna shoot them. Yeah, great idea, but they're under the gun. I'm like, it's okay. And I said louder than I needed to. I'm gonna make them stand up. Marched up, expecting to be killed. Marched up, towards the boat itself. Couple of people stood up. Bang, bang, bang. Shot 2 or 3 people. Backed up. They did not chase me. Huh, that's weird. Okay, did it again. You guys load it again. We'll do it again. Bang, bang, bang. Everyone drop down again. That's really weird. At this point, my gunners go, okay, so who do you want us to shoot next? Because we've run out of people surrounding the doorway. We've killed them all, and somehow nobody wants to take their spots. Very strange. And on a walk, I said, you see that guy in the back who looks like he's thinking about giving orders? I shit you not, some guy in the back, Scooby-Doo, whoop! Kill him! And somehow no one wanted to give orders after that. It was just so weird. I don't know, man. Meanwhile, on the other gangway, Donadon has taken his poor little newbie and, as I am told it, grabbed her by the back of the doublet and aimed her like a Gatling gun. Fire, 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 essentially tossing her aside at the point where she finally gets killed. The final blow of the battle, which may or may not have been a legal blow, was him reaching around to slit someone's throat with their dagger while they were busy trying to parry me with my sword. And so somehow we won that. I don't know. It was so weird. No one wanted to give orders. I don't understand. I don't know how that happens. So
nobody came up the gangplanks is the part that's the like.
Yeah.
Get 'em,
just,
Ray?
It worked. Get 'em,
but yeah. So that's my recommendation: is always kill the commander. And I say that unfortunately as a commander who has had people put a lot of effort into trying to kill me. Because I'm sadly not a quiet person.
Don't kill the commander. We are nice and kind and sweet and
Love
innocent.
us. Love your commander.
All right, I know that we are over, but screw it. It's fun. Peter, your story, and we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, but if there are any others, please drop one in the chat. Peter.
All right, I think my favorite was actually the last time I was on an open field battle at Penzik that wasn't just a giant line fight. And that was also my first time on the battlefield of Penzik. It was Penzik 36. And we decided the plan was going to be that we would, or wait, was it 36? No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was 38. So it wasn't my first time, but it was a minute ago. Chrétien Fournier was our general, and he decided that he wanted to practice hammer and anvil tactics all war season on the small unit scale. So 5 to 10 person units, hammer and anvils all over the place. And we were assigned in pairs. Your unit is a hammer, your unit is an anvil. So if you're an anvil, your job is to run into a group of the opposition and just stick to them, and let a hammer come in from the side or from behind and kill them. And rumors had gotten across to the eastern side that we were doing a hammer and anvil something. And their interpretation apparently was that it was half of the army was the hammer, half of the army was the anvil. And so the first round they guessed left was the hammer. And we came out and it didn't work for them at all because we broke the fight up into small things and munched them while they were waiting to get overwhelmingly slammed. And the second fight, they decided it must have been the other side, and it still didn't work. The third time, they said, okay, this is dumb, that we're just going to go, which almost worked. And then Chrétien had 2 units in reserve. He had us, the Wednesday Company, were really new, and he also had the Brendoken Blades as he called us his shoulder-mounted rocket, and to just point us and go blow that thing up. And he saw a gap form between Atlantia, who was the East's right flank, and the East, and sent us through, all 7 of us, to zip through a 20-foot gap in the line that had formed kind of diagonally. And we zipped through, and things were not looking great when we got there. But then about half of Atlantia went, wait, there's red tape behind our line. There's organized red tape behind our line. This is a problem. And about half of the kingdom, without coordinating or communicating, turned around to come and chase us. And the line that had been doing bad things to us, because they all just went squish, instead of letting us break them up, just suddenly turned into Swiss cheese and crumbled. And we died horribly. I think I got hit by 6 people at one time. We died horribly, and so did Atlantia, and it was beautiful. That was probably my favorite episode of situational awareness on the battlefield, and how beautifully bad things can go.
I just want to say my favorite part of that story is the lesson that bad intelligence is much, much worse than no intelligence.
Yup. Yeah. One of the things that Chrétien banged into our heads too was that it doesn't matter if the other side hears what we say we're going to do. If we do it right, they're just going to know why they died.
Mm-hmm. And as we've said previously in this chat, actually I think it was you, Peter, if we raise all the boats, it's going to make for a much more interesting fight, much more interesting melee.
Yep.
That doesn't mean maybe rent a billboard in New York City and be like, this is our plan for Pennsic, although that would be hilarious. But so we're gonna dive into the Q&A right now, and our first question is actually from Stuart, and he has stated that kind of earlier in the chat he referenced that he doesn't want to suicide when he's legged in res battles because his persona is Catholic, and we've touched on this a little bit with talking about scenarios that have stories and how to integrate a little bit more play into scenarios. But how can we encourage people to still play the SCA game as well as doing the battle instead of just focusing on winning the sport, the melee game itself? Or is there a way to do that? And I'm going to open that up to all the panelists. I'm sorry if you hear a cat. My cat will not stop screaming in the background. I'm going to mute myself, but go.
I know we've done a little bit with it. The town battle at Golf Wars last year is kind of an example where knights and mods were able to cross the river. The theory as we gave it was knights obviously have horses, they should have a horse. Mods can just walk on water. That was the explanation we had. Not a great explanation, but that was something that we kind of threw in there of your rank matters in some way. It makes the game slightly different from you. I think it ends up being a personal choice. I think I'm going to call us game makers. I think that's what this panel is. It's a group of people who in some way have influence over what the game is. We have the opportunity to allow it, but I don't know how much I feel like I'd want to force it. I've seen things like Duels at Dawn where people are, really excited. They researched, exactly what a duel would look like. They read the handbook and they've organized this whole thing. And I think those things are awesome. I think our job as game makers is to provide a space where that can happen. At the same time, I don't want to force anyone. I mean, with all the love in my heart, I don't want to read a textbook before I fight someone. Okay, well, I do anyway, never mind. That was a bad example. But to offer that opportunity, and people do with it what they will. I know my usual peer pressure is if you have something like that where you've got this great idea of a scenario with a plot line that's going to have people doing personas. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Come to Golf Wars. Say you want to, tell me before you show up, please, so I can put you on the schedule. Tell us what you want to do. And as much as possible, I will be glad to sit there and help you run it. I'll provide the name tags. Let me know what you want, and I'll make it happen. And if your problem is I can't get to Golf Wars, find me personally, I will find a way to get you to Golf Wars. Like if your offer is I'm going to run 2 scenarios at Golf Wars, heck, I'll start a fundraising, figure out a way to get you there. Like I'm willing to do this because I feel like my job as Armic is to make that war as much fun for as many people as possible.
Can I hear the question again?
So how can we encourage, so the question itself is how can we encourage people to play the SCA game as well as the battle, instead of just focusing on winning the melee scenario itself? Is there a way to do that?
I think I'm mostly with Hawke on that in scenario design, there's so many variants on persona. Our previous king was a samurai and his consort was a Spanish queen. there's not a good way to say, oh, this battle is all about persona play. At the same time, I think it's great to model what you want to see on the field and what you want to see in the world. If you think that persona activity and taking what your persona would do really seriously, which I think is awesome, go out and model that and make it cool, make it awesome. Let people tell stories about it so that other people think it's cool and awesome. And that's how change happens. Legislating change, it isn't a great way to play, in my opinion. I think it's a lot better to lead than to force. Yeah, it was Seto, who most of the time his persona is samurai, but he also did a really amazing 14th century and now is doing some really awesome Lance Connect.
Must be nice to have a tailor.
Dude's amazing.
Was that Stuart Raven that posed that question?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Stuart. It's a difficult question. He's from An Tir. I've known him for about 20 years. I'd like to tackle it just a little bit. So I think the real question is, how do we make winning less important than having an SCA experience, having a persona experience, having a development experience? Or how do we make winning less important than those parts of it? And I think there's a variety of ways you can do that. And I think one of the ways you can do that is not by making winning less important, but by making the other parts more important. And one of my suggestions would be to bring in the audience, bring in the people who are watching what's going on and allowing them to have some sort of effect on the outcome of the battle based on what they're seeing. So if you reward behavior that you want to see and allow people other than yourself as the MIC to reward that behavior, you create a system in which people will behave the way you want and the audience will reward them for it. So if a great example of this is, rose tournaments, people are given roses for chivalrous behavior, right? Well, you can do similar things on the battlefield if you give the audience the way to hand out extra lives or improvements of position based on what they see. So if somebody is out there speaking and rhyming couplets, as an example that was given earlier, they can be rewarded by that by members of the audience. They can be given something that will give them an advantage in war. And so in that fashion, I think you can encourage persona development over absolute victory.
Yeah, it's bringing in parts of a pot of arms where you have the gallery that can give out favors and such to and reward those who do more than just fight, but show the essence of their passion and their love and their theater. And maybe just as people come off the field dead, have a set of audience that does that says you get to live again.
That's brilliant. I think that's great, right? And they give them a rose or they give them a life. Like you give the audience regens to hand out to people whose performances that they've enjoyed, right? And you talk them beforehand. And you say, look, this battle is all about rhyming couplets. This battle is all about chivalry. This battle is all about whatever. And you state those criteria and you let the audience reward. And I think you'll get what you want out of that. And Hawke totally has her hand up, and I'm going to mute myself now.
No, it's because as you said it, I remembered we used to run these tavern brawls. We had an issue in our kingdom where it was all very serious double a limb fights. We want to fix that. And my solution when I want to fix something is like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so we had these tavern brawls that we ran, and one of our rules for making the rules of it was the audience has to be involved in some way. I'll admit that they were more like fun, joke type things as opposed to something serious, because that was our goal. But we did a strip fencing tournament where each of the fencers had a proxy stripper, and all of the clothing got donated to Gold Key, and there were rules about what your bottom layer had to be.
I'm going to say, it sounds a little dangerous.
We put a lot of rules in place to keep this family friendly.
Trimaris, man, Trimaris.
Trimaris. And we handed each of the proxy strippers a mug and gave out dollar bills with the Baroness's face, with her permission, to all of the audience members so that they could tip their person It was pins that you were wearing, and when they hit a pin shaped like a shirt, your proxy stripper had to, donate that. And I mean, again, it's silly and funny and has a lot of potential for bad things to happen. You're gonna have to control it. But if you do, it turns into something where someone walks by and they go, "What on earth is happening over there?" And then having stepped over to see what on earth these crazy rapier fighters are doing, they then have the opportunity to become part of the game. I mean, obviously this isn't a period of a persona, but things like that where you can, roses are a great idea, things like that, things where you get the audience in there, because it makes it part of the whole surrounding. I forget who it was, I think it was Oliver who talked about the tournament or brawl over the day where, the art side, was what earned you res points, basically, what earned you resurrections, and the target archers, when they did something, that was how you got rid of those and things like that. And so stuff like that, where you just involve as much of the community as you can. And the whole community, the whole kingdom, however you want to phrase that.
All the mid-realmers are here, like, taking bets on how fast we'd be banished if we tried to run something like that up here.
That's
Not the time we
what
proposed
we
it, I
run up
think.
here. We do that all the time up here.
I mean, okay, so we did another one where you had a mug of water, and you could pay water to the devil to resurrect, and you could go and beg more water off of audience members of the Baroness. A little less risque. And another one where you were saving animals out of a barn, and the audience got these hoops of neon orange, really thick rope that they got to toss into the burning barn, and if you stepped on one, your foot got frozen if you'd stepped through a burned out hole. So again, they're not necessarily specifically period. I mean, it's probably not what the questioner was asking when he wanted persona. But take that sort of thing and go, okay, well, how can I come up with a period version of this? What am I going to come up with?
Hawk, I don't even know if it has to be period. I think the bottom line is what the question was: how do we encourage a certain type of behavior?
Okay.
How do we move away from this win at all costs behavior? Because my persona has a different agenda than win at all costs. So how do we allow those people to play their game? And the way you do that is you give them conditions in which they can play that way. So
Yeah, exactly.
if bringing the audience in, allowing them to flower in front of them is the way for them to play the game the way they want to play, then as you say, that's the way to think about these things. And I think realistically, anything you do outside of last man standing, outside of first person to stick the other person, will allow people to explore those types of things.
Okay, so I am going to cut that question there because that is a really good stopping point. I know that at least one of our panelists has to cut kind of now, but there is another question from the audience from Albion, who is a little bit sad to see more RPG hate than love. And he just took over Tortuga. They just took over Tortuga last Penzic. Loves them and would like to include more RPG inclusive scenarios. So as game makers, how can you overcome typical RPG issues?
I would love to answer this.
All right, go ahead.
It's actually already been answered twice.
Yeah, you talked about
Oliver,
it.
Oliver talked about the Alamo scenario that he ran, and we do something very similar up here. And it's an interesting cultural thing because as an American, I'm assuming you're American, Oliver, you refer to the Alamo. We call it a Zulu war because, of course, as a Canadian, we have a Commonwealth. We have a Commonwealth background, and so for us, we'd run the exact same scenario where one side has no guns, and the other side has all the guns, right? And they're in a defensive position with their guns, with a set number of ammo. How long can you survive against an opponent that has unlimited regenerations but no guns? And so we would play that and then switch sides and do it again. And people love that game. We would play that as a timed scenario. And so the people with the guns, they get to fire their guns a lot, and it's a really, really good time. And it allows the people who have carbines and rifles and pistols, and they love that stuff. It allows them an opportunity to do that. And so I think that's a really great way to do that. We do that as well, and it sounds like you guys do it too. And the other thing was the convention that I mentioned earlier. I don't know if this person heard that, which was if the problem with RBGs, the reason people hate RBGs is because they're OP, they're overpowered, they unbalanced scenarios. If one side brings 20 RBGs and 300 shot, and the other side has 2 RBGs and 10 shot, and you allow everything on the field, it's gonna suck. So you don't do that. You put rules in place that allow people to enjoy these toys rather than hate these toys. And what we do is we say, you can bring as many RBGs as you want, but you're both going to bring the same amount of ammo, and you can use it whenever you want, but you can't glean it. So if it's 45 shots a piece, it's 45 shots a piece. Once you shoot it, it stays on the ground. You clean it up after the war is over. And in that fashion, your commanders have to decide. I had a scenario where I said, okay, we're going to play this even up RBG thing. And one side said, oh, we have 80 shot. And the other side said, we have 5. I knew they didn't have 5. I knew they had way more than 5. But they said, we have 5. And so by the rules, it was like both sides had 5 shots. Guess what? Those 5 shots were used very judiciously. So if you create scenarios where they are actually useful and fun, because fun is always the razor, and if it's not fun, don't do it, then people will enjoy using them again. That's my take on it.
I know the biggest complaint I hear at home, sorry, Peter, I know you raised your hand. The biggest complaint I hear at home is, especially from a significant other who is a tall mod, is especially non-res battles. RBGs are total no-go because you get geared up, you put on all your toys, you get out there, they see the big white collar and they go pew, and you're done for the rest of the day. So that's my take. Peter, I saw your hand raised.
Fight with a shield.
Yeah. That was my answer when we had the no res on the functionally unlimited shot bridge battle. I was a commander. I was like, well, okay, I'm carrying a shield for this battle. But really, I agree that the two things, if you want to have unlimited shot, have unlimited res. If you want to have you're dead, you need to limit shot, and it needs to be a pretty small number. And if you think about the time scales that we're looking at and the press that we're looking at in a fight, and you want to apply a tiny little semi-realistic filter on the fight, it's really, really hard to load a wheel lock pistol in the middle of a press. Really hard.
Yes, exactly. That's why you limit it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can go out on a warfield with 50 shots. I can load those suckers fast. You can load and shoot that pistol and throw it behind you and have people loading them for you. That is not realistic at all, and it's just complete. And I know this because I've done it, and it completely unbalances a fight.
Yeah, even with just like a Civil War era flintlock or caplock, it takes forever to reload, and it's hard to do it in chaos. How many people shot their ramrods downrange in every Civil War battle? And so that we're slapping out 10 or 15 rounds in a minute with a wheel lock pistol that you have to wind up a spring on every time? Well,
so the answer is if you want to play with RBGs, you accept limits on them to make it fun for all, because fun is always the razor.
Have a non-proliferation treaty.
So Albion followed up with so then how do you deal with the people who show up to the RBG battle and still complain they got shot?
Ritual sacrifice.
Right? I was like, neon sign?
Honestly, you've explained the TRPs, you've explained the rules, the conventions beforehand. If they don't like them, they can go and have a water break. It's going to be over in less than 10 minutes anyway.
Here's a black and yellow stick. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you for marshalling.
Yeah.
We have the same problem both on the rapier and the armored field. There it's combat archery, and the complaints are the same. There are 4 groups that always get shot. Anybody in shiny armor, anybody that is wearing something white, anybody that is commanding, or anybody that is another archer or RBG person. Those are your primary targets. And yes, the knights especially, the mods and white scarves especially, will get shot a lot. Everybody else is a target of opportunity. Sometimes you get hit by accident. Yeah. So yes, the best way to have a lot of, when I do scenarios, not every scenario has RBGs or spears. Those are in certain scenarios, usually with reses or limited reses. or certain conditions where you have like a bridge battle where it becomes actually useful to use those as a force multiplier to be able to break a bridge or break a doorway. There's a tactical reason to put them in, not just to have them so people can have a duck shoot.
Yeah, bridge battles with missile weapons is exactly that. It's a duck shoot. You have to be really careful. You have to really think about the scenario and what you're going to allow in a bridge battle, because it's not fun, right? It's not fun for those people to be shot while they're waiting for their chance.
Yeah.
So I do heavy fighting as well, and I'm an elite combat archer on the heavy field, and I can pretty much reach out and kill anybody I want. And so missile weapons, I'll tell you right now, missile weapons are OP. They're OP on any field. And so for me, I actually don't kill the same person over and over again. Why? Because I don't want to ruin their day, right? And so it's the same thing on the rapier field. When you think about these things, you can very easily ruin someone's day. And that's not what we want to do. So as an MIC, you need to realize that, and you need to build scenarios that give those people an opportunity to have a good time without ruining somebody's day. And that's a challenge, but it's definitely possible.
Could you explain what OP is real fast?
Out of period.
Oh, sorry,
No,
no.
no.
Oh, no.
Overpowered.
Sorry, it's a gaming term. It's overpowered. Overpowered. Combat archery is overpowered. RBG is overpowered. You want to know why combat archery is overpowered? Because we have on the heavy field, my 30-pound bow with my crappy little fiberglass shaft. I can easily shoot like 6 or 7 of those in a minute, right? And you can't do that with a 120-pound longbow. And the same thing with our RBGs. I can load my RBG super fast. I have a carbine, I have pistols, I can load them super fast. There's no way you could do that in period, right? So they're OP, so you have to deal with that.
I can load an RBG with one hand. Because I had an argument with somebody about that one.
I have nothing but admiration for that. I don't know. What do? You brace it against your hip or something?
Yeah, I'm going to completely admit, like, it takes me 2 minutes to do. And it involves some yoga. But because I'd lost my hand, and somebody's like, you can't load that one hand. And I'm like, you want to bet? Hold on. Okay, it's
And
loaded.
we're back to the dollar bills.
And so just to be clear, I have a ton of RBGs. I have muskets, I have carbines, I have pistols, I have duck foots, I have over and unders. I've got probably 1,000 shot right over here, and I don't actually use it anymore. Because when I became a real person, I realized that all it did was ruin other people's fun. So you have to manage it.
We're getting a lot of, this week has been awesome because actually every week has been pretty awesome, because at the core and at the crux of it, it really is about how to have fun. And this week we're really touching on the empathy aspect of it, when you're taking into account other people's fun to build these scenarios and make sure. So it's always kind of interesting seeing the macro with the game design and then seeing the micro with the I don't shoot people multiple times, or etc. We had a follow-up actually from Pietro from Meridiates. Basically, bridge battles and other battles with the bottlenecks tend to become very unfun meat grinders. Is there a way to make them more fun? How do you fix that?
Plan an exit. Like, from a safety point of view, plan an exit. That's on my side is, for example, if you have a bridge, make the hay bales able to, everyone has a chance of being able to get over the hay bales, emphasize how to safely exit, have enough room in those, in between the bridges that they can get out, that they have a way out. Because I've seen, especially kill pockets, where the person gets killed and they're kind of stuck in this crap situation where we really don't want them exiting through the enemy's line. That's kind of a dick move. There's not really a safe way to exit through their own line without getting jacked. They can curl up in a ball on the floor and, pray to their mommies. Not really fun. It's not a fun situation. So intentionally planning how they're going to exit, even if it's, we're blocking off this area, exit only, nobody can stand here, and making weirdnesses. Whatever you have to come up with a plan how that's going to look.
So so basically what you're saying, make it safe and it'll be fun.
It'll help at least.
Yeah.
More
I-
experience in those
extra-
fights also helps a lot.
I was about to hop in with that, Peter. I know. Would you like to take that as our panelist?
Well, I mean, you can tell the difference between in a battle between a unit that knows how to do those fights and a bunch of random folks who found themselves hitting a wall together. And you can see that when a unit knows how to fight together, they know how to let each other out when they're dead. They know how to pressure the line so that it has to flex. How they can create local overmatch. Basically, apply more pressure to one spot in the line than it can handle without getting buried. And be able to move things around and not just stand there and go ding, 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 squish for 45 minutes and not move more than 3 feet each way. It's not easy, but it's definitely something that the vast majority of fencers can learn if they get together with 3 or 4 of their friends and practice. But it's like learning how to do a disengage. It's not hard exactly, but it's also not easy exactly. And it takes practice. It takes experience to know when the pressure's right and when you're just setting yourself up to get pezzed. And unfortunately, when you have a bunch of people who, like Oliver was saying, come out for the spring break to the war, a lot of people don't have those skills. So having more people who have more practice to be the rebar in that concrete of your line is really helpful.
I know with the command staff we have currently, we use those kill pocket drills to knock the rust off our very first event in February, which is awful. It is like eating your vegetables, but by the time Gulf Wars runs around, we find a couple of those kids at spring break and throw them in our line. And it's been effective. It seems to help, but there is another follow-up. How do you prevent, this is from Simon, how do you prevent, or do you all think it's necessary to prevent the common literally run at the enemy line and suicide until we break their kill pocket? How do you prevent gaming the unlimited res concept? Would a timer on reses or something like that help? Don't take the timer on reses. What would you do to fix that?
In terms of timer on reses, just because that was the last part, I don't time reses, but I do make sure that I put the res point far enough away that there's a slight staggering because of the distance. Like, if my gate is here, my res point's got to be a good 20, 30 feet away from the gate minimum, because otherwise it's just tap, like you get backed up into the res point almost, and that is always that goes badly, from my experience. So that's the extent of what I do in terms of a timer, is just, spacing, assuming you have the thing. If it's safe and it's not causing frustration, I don't consider it a problem. It's when, Warwick says, the razor blade is fun. If I was on the other side, would I want it happening to me, or would I just get pissed that I drove 10 hours to have this happen to me? So finding that balance. Training, I think, is also the part of it, as mentioned, is if you have trained that there are other ways to break a kill pocket other than just, the suicide, let me jump on your blades! You don't run into that problem. But of course, we, as you said, there is that group of spring breakers. And sometimes crossover fighters who haven't had the emphasis on, no, rapier, you can't do body-to-body contact, you can't just shove each other out of the way, we don't allow that. I've run into that once or twice where I've had to remind enthusiastic fighters that was not something that was permitted on the rapier field.
Fun killer.
Yeah. I think
I am. I wasn't a kindergarten teacher. I'm sure anyone who's ever sat there and had to listen to me explain a battle can hear the kindergarten teacher in me. Okay, does everyone hear me? Touch your nose. And it's silly, I realize, but it's what works.
Make them all sit crisscross applesauce, so they're all sitting there looking at you, not talking to each other. Can see and hear you.
Yeah, I will on that. Really unrelated. I will note.
She's buffering.
Never, ever, ever do two sides separately. No. Wait. People are moving.
You're
Are we moving again?
buffering.
Am I back?
Never
back.
ever what?
I'm buffering.
You're back. Start again.
Never explain a scenario to the two sides separately. Bring them all together in the center of the field. Explain it all at once. You will never, ever manage to repeat yourself exactly, even if you have a script, because someone's going to ask a question.
This is very good advice.
Yeah. Always explain it together. The other advice is, as long as you can, and you try. God, Oliver, I love that. I need one. As much as possible when you can, I try to have a marshals meeting half hour before the start of a scenario and make sure all my marshals know what the scenario is, and they get to sit in my explanation for the fighters as well.
Have you ever given handouts to your marshals?
I actually have a whiteboard.
Yeah, that's cool. I give handouts.
I do give a handout. It's called the site booklet. That is my handout. And at Golf Wars, really recently, I have a giant whiteboard that has, as a teacher, it's literally, here are the same questions I get asked about every single war point scenario. Is there DFB? What's the win condition? Is there resurrection? And it's literally a board that says DFB, no. Win condition, kill everyone. Resurrection, touch the line, go over the line, touch the point, whatever it is. Unlimited, 2 per person, whatever that is. And that gets put up as soon as one battle ends, I switch it to the next battle. So at least there's a prayer that people have seen it and read it. Maybe, if I'm lucky, I don't know. I'm trying. But I literally sit in front of that board for my marshals meeting, and we'd go through the board.
Mm-hmm.
Again, can you tell?
I've been on the wrong end of that. I mean, the right end, the very helpful end. And it was very useful, and it did help prevent a lot of frustration later.
Whiteboards are magical.
Mm.
It's literally, I made the world's cheapest whiteboard. You go get shower board at Home Depot and some PVC, and you just shove that thing together. They're fairly cheap. I spent $30 on it, and that includes a pipe.
I should probably ask you this later. What did you say? Shower board?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's what's called shower board. They sell it at Home Depot. Comes in about 8 by 10 foot boards.
Damn, that's awesome.
And then you can really cut it into nice little pieces.
Yeah, they will absolutely cut it for you.
That's literally pro tip right there.
Oh, yeah. Hawk saved me a butt ton of money when I was chief of staff of the realm army.
Yeah, and then I cut, I think they're like 2 by 3 feet, maybe 3 by 4 feet, whatever fit on the PVC I happen to have. I originally tried to essentially super glue them to the PVC and gave up, and literally put this thing together at Golf Wars, grabbed a drill and just ta-da. And my headings are written in permanent marker, so I don't have to rewrite them. Everything else is in dry erase marker. I bring pretty colors because I can. The other side of the board has the schedule and any notes about anything that's changed, like schedule changes or whatever, as well as whoever is the marshal in charge for that day.
You know, every time Hawk speaks, I forget what the original question was.
That's all right. It was about RPGs, don't you remember?
Yeah.
It was, I also want to caveat that with, I really enjoy when Hawk speaks because I learn a lot of stuff and it's amazing. Oh, yeah. But then I'm like, what was the original question again?
The original question.
Bottlenecks. It was RPGs to bottlenecks, and we are so out of time. We are almost an hour over.
I really got to get going.
Thank you all for everybody who stayed and listened. Thank you all to our panelists, Peter, Warwick, Oliver, Hawk. This has been great. This has been. Oh, thank you, Oliver. Samesies.
We need to make some of those on painted on plywood for the back sides of the Fight Me signs.
Yes.
If you guys could see our private moderators chat, you would know that we are absolutely in love with this panel. Thank you guys so much for such an organic, engaging conversation. We hit all of our points, even if we didn't have to explicitly ask the questions we had prepared, and that is so freaking cool.
Thank you guys for moderating. I've done a couple of this. This was very, very well moderated, legitimately. No pun intended.
Bruce's.
I really enjoyed myself.
Wistric.
Doing this.
It's all Wistric.
Yeah.
But
Nice color commentary. You actually keep this thing on track.
I learned from the best.
Like, kudos, legitimately.
We will be back in 2 weeks. We're still putting together that topic, but we're kind of hoping to touch on some like unit training techniques and discussing the difference between an individual fight versus a unit fight. So if you want to join us, same time, usually about an hour less. We're usually done by now.
That's probably my fault. All my stories are very long.
Asleep by now.
You need both, Warwick. It's us.
Hey, good
I-
stories are worth telling.
We
Good night.
thank
Good
you
night,
everyone for coming. We're gonna wrap it here. Wistric, make it stop recording, please, for
Yes,
the love
ma'am.
of God.
Thanks. Miss you guys. Have fun.
I miss you out.